A man from Ukraine worked with people in the US to set up a system called Laptop Farm
to steal sensitive and classified data to advance Pyongyang's military and nuclear ambitions.
Welcome to the Hacker Gallery. This story is about to reveal how North Korean cyber operatives orchestrated one of the most sophisticated infiltrations of Western companies in history. Right now, as you're watching this, thousands of highly skilled North Korean IT workers are operating worldwide, hiding in plain sight. They're not just random hackers. They're part of a carefully orchestrated state-sponsored operation that's both brilliant and terrifying in its execution. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea to most of us, has developed something unprecedented. A global army of tech professionals who appear to be normal developers, contractors, and IT specialists. But here's where it gets interesting. These aren't your typical corporate spies. These operatives work directly under two of North Korea's most secretive organizations: the Munitions Industry Department, which controls their nuclear weapons program, and the Ministry of Atomic Energy Industry. Their mission? Generate millions in revenue for North Korea's weapons programs, while bypassing international sanctions. They're basically North Korea's sole profitable enterprise, if you will. What makes this operation particularly fascinating is its sophistication. These aren't crude attempts at cybercrime. They're using legitimate freelance platforms, mainstream software development tools, and standard messaging apps. They're participating in this global machine the same way that your local web developer or IT consultant does. The genius of this scheme lies in its simplicity. By day, these operators appear to be normal IT professionals, bidding on projects, completing work, and collecting payments. But behind this facade, they're using a complex network of cryptocurrency exchanges and digital payment systems to funnel money back to North Korea's weapons programs. I've studied countless cyber operations, but this one really stands out to me. Think about it. While most state-sponsored cyber attacks focus on direct system breaches or data theft, North Korea created an entire shadow workforce, hiding in the open-source communities and marketplaces you might use yourself. This is just the beginning of our story. And trust me, it gets even more intriguing, because when you understand how deep this deception goes, you'll never look at that LinkedIn connection request the same way again. Let me tell you about Christina Marie Chapman and Oleksandr Didenko. Their arrest in May 2024 blew the lid off one of the most sophisticated cyber deception operations I've ever seen. Chapman, arrested in Arizona, and Didenko, caught in Poland, weren't just random cyber criminals. They were the architects of a scheme that would make most hackers' heads spin. Here's where it gets wild. These two managed to compromise over 60 American identities and infiltrate more than 300 US companies. But what's worse is they generated $6.8 million for North Korean IT workers, all while creating false tax liabilities for dozens of innocent Americans. You've probably heard of VPNs. Virtual private networks. They're those services that let you watch Netflix from different countries, right? Well, Chapman and Didenko turned this simple technology into something far more sinister. They used VPNs and VPSs, virtual private servers, to make it appear like their North Korean operators were working from legitimate US locations. But here's where their genius really showed. Chapman operated what we call a laptop farm. Imagine dozens of computers, all running simultaneously, creating the perfect environment. Each machine routed traffic through different locations, making their North Korean operators appear to be legitimate US-based contractors. Didenko's role was even more intricate. He managed, and I'm not exaggerating here, 871 different proxy identities. Think about that number for a second. That's 871 different digital personas, each with its own accounts on platforms and payment services. It was like running a virtual city of fake people. The technical sophistication here was unprecedented. They weren't just using basic proxy servers or simple VPN connections. This was a multi-layered deception operation that combined identity theft, network manipulation, and financial fraud into one seamless package. What makes this case particularly fascinating is how they leveraged legitimate business infrastructure against itself. Every platform, every payment system, every digital workflow tool became a weapon in their arsenal. They didn't need to hack these systems. They just needed to make them believe their users were legitimate. And here's the thing that keeps cybersecurity professionals up at night. This operation ran successfully for 3 years before anyone caught on. Think about that next time you're hiring a remote developer or working with an online contractor. The person on the other end of that Slack message might not be who you think they are, but this was just the beginning. As we'll see, the techniques pioneered by Chapman and Didenko would soon evolve into something even more sophisticated. As investigators began piecing together the North Korean IT worker operation, patterns emerged like a thief in the night. It's not just about technical skills, it's about exploiting human trust at scale. These operators were masters of disguise. They'd present themselves as developers from South Korea, Japan, Eastern Europe, even the US. But like any complex deception, there were always tells, digital breadcrumbs that, once you know what to look for, reveal the truth. I've studied hundreds of these cases, and the patterns are fascinating. Imagine you're a team leader for a top 500 company, and you notice your new developer logging in from Tokyo at 9 a.m., then Singapore at 10 a.m., then Seoul at 11 a.m. That's not just someone traveling. That's impossible travel. This person is using multiple VPN endpoints to mask their true location. These operators would set up elaborate payment systems, frequently moving money through Chinese bank accounts, or requesting cryptocurrency payments. Now, in isolation, that might not raise eyebrows, but combined with other patterns, that's when alarm bells should start ringing. Let me share something most people don't realize about professional infiltration operations. The hardest part isn't the technical deception, it's maintaining consistency across dozens of digital platforms. These operators would slip up in small ways. Different spellings of their names across platforms, inconsistent work histories, educational backgrounds that didn't quite match up. One of the most telling indicators: time zones. Despite all their sophisticated technical tricks, they couldn't solve the fundamental problem of being in North Korea while pretending to be in New York. They'd be unreachable during normal business hours, or suddenly available at 3 a.m. their supposed local time. Here's the really devious part. They started bringing in non-North Korean freelancers as collaborators. This added a layer of legitimacy to their operations. After all, if you're working with real developers from various countries, who's going to suspect you're part of a state-sponsored operation? But perhaps the most concerning evolution was how they used their privileged access. Once inside a company's systems as legitimate contractors, they could enable sophisticated cyber intrusions that would have been impossible from the outside. It's like being handed the keys to the kingdom through the front door. These weren't just random hackers trying their luck. This was a coordinated state-level operation that learned and adapted in real time. Every time we figured out one of their tactics, they'd evolve 3 new ones. And as we'll see in what happens next, these early patterns were just the beginning. The real sophistication was yet to come. In early 2024, SecureWorks investigated what might be the most elegant corporate infiltration I've ever seen. Imagine hiring what seems to be a perfectly qualified contractor, only to discover you've just handed your internal network to a state-sponsored threat actor. When you're working from home, you might use something like Chrome Remote Desktop or AnyDesk to connect to your office computer. These are legitimate tools used by millions of professionals every day, but in the wrong hands, they become weapons. The attack was brilliant in its simplicity. The North Korean operative was hired as an external contractor and immediately went to work, just not the kind of work the company was expecting. Using the company's own virtual desktop infrastructure, think of it as a secure gateway to internal systems, they began transferring proprietary data to a personal Google Drive account. Here's where it gets interesting. The operative used a combination of tools that would look completely normal to any IT department. They connected through Astral VPN and residential proxies, making their traffic appear to come from legitimate locations. They used standard remote access software that wouldn't trigger any alarms. They even employed IP-based KVM devices, hardware that lets you control multiple computers remotely. The company only discovered something was wrong when they noticed the contractor's poor performance and terminated their employment. That's when the real game began. Soon after, extortion emails started arriving from various Outlook and Gmail addresses. These weren't your typical spam. They contained zippy archives with samples of the stolen data. The message was clear: pay a 6-figure cryptocurrency ransom or watch your proprietary data go public. What makes this attack particularly fascinating is how it leveraged trust. The contractor didn't need to hack through any firewalls or crack any passwords. They were invited in, given access, and trusted with legitimate credentials. It's like walking through the front door with a smile while wearing a perfect disguise. But this was just the beginning. As we'll see in the know-before incident that followed, these tactics would evolve into something even more sophisticated. When you combine this level of technical expertise with advanced AI tools, well, that's when things get really interesting. Remember, sometimes the most dangerous threats aren't the ones trying to break down your walls. They're the ones you invite through your front door. Let me tell you about one of the most notorious and recent cyber infiltration attempts I've ever seen. Imagine targeting KnowBe4, a company that literally teaches others how to detect cyber threats. That's exactly what happened in July 2024, and the sophistication of this operation was simply astonishing. The North Korean operative didn't just steal someone's identity. They created a perfect digital doppelganger. They passed background checks, provided verifiable references, and even completed 4 separate video interviews. Think about that for a second. 4 different video calls where they had to maintain their deception. The operative used AI tools to create not just static photos, but dynamic video appearances that matched their stolen identity's face. This wasn't just some basic deep fake. This was sophisticated enough to fool multiple professional interviewers in real-time conversation. Everything seemed perfect. KnowBe4 hired them as a principal software engineer, a position with significant system access. They shipped the new hire a company MacBook, standard procedure for remote workers. That's when things got interesting. On July 15, 2024 at 9:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, KnowBe4's antivirus system flagged something unusual. The new hire's laptop was attempting to load malware. But here's where it gets technically fascinating. They weren't just downloading malicious code directly. They were using a Raspberry Pi, a small, portable computer, as an intermediate step to try to slip past security measures. I want to explain something crucial about modern security systems. Modern-day antivirus systems are commonly referred to as an EDR, an endpoint detection and response tool. It doesn't just look for viruses. It watches for suspicious behavior patterns. This detail becomes important in just a minute. The attacker had carefully manipulated session history files and was systematically transferring harmful files, executing unauthorized software. They were connecting through a VPN that made it appear they were working US hours, but the timing gave them away. They were actually operating from North Korea or China during their local nighttime. This wasn't just about stealing data or causing damage. This was an attempt to infiltrate a company that trains others in cybersecurity. Think about the intelligence value of accessing the systems of a company that protects other companies. But in the end, it was the EDR system that caught them. All that sophisticated deception, all those layers of technical deceit, undone by automated security monitoring that spotted the one thing they couldn't hide: their malicious actions on the endpoint itself. This incident marked a new era in cyber deception, when state-sponsored hackers can combine identity theft, AI impersonation, and sophisticated malware deployment in a single operation. Well, that changes the game entirely. And it makes you wonder, how many others North Korean hackers are currently employed in Western companies and haven't been caught? The response to North Korea's cyber deception campaign was unprecedented in its scope. In a coordinated strike, the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control and the Republic of Korea targeted not just individual operators, but entire networks. We're talking about 6 key individuals and 2 entities spread across Russia, China, and the UAE. All part of this sophisticated financial web supporting North Korea's weapons programs. It's not just about firewalls and antivirus software anymore. The real innovation is in verification chains. Ways to prove someone is who they claim to be. And this is where the new defensive measures get really interesting. Think about the sophistication of these controls. When a company receives documentation now, they're not just checking the papers. They're contacting the issuing institutions directly, bypassing any contact information provided by the applicant. It's a complete reversal of the trust model these North Korean operators relied on. Modern security teams are now using port checking, a way to detect when someone's using remote desktop tools or VPNs. It's like catching someone with a mask on. They're also implementing biometric login systems and running sophisticated background checks that can spot even the smallest inconsistencies in someone's computer use. The financial controls are equally sophisticated. Companies are now flagging any requests for cryptocurrency payments or suspicious banking patterns. They're watching for those small, unauthorized transactions that used to slip through the cracks. Every new account faces extra scrutiny, especially those with documentation patterns similar to known compromise attempts. One of the most effective countermeasures. Companies are simply disabling remote collaboration tools on the computers they send to the remote workers. This causes large obstacles for hackers trying to get in and out as quickly as they can. So yeah, if it wasn't clear by now, North Korean operators were using networks in Russia and China to orchestrate their schemes, setting up shell companies and managing hidden bank accounts. The international response didn't just target the operators, it went after their entire infrastructure. The sanctions implemented weren't just about freezing assets. They were about cutting off the oxygen supply to these operations. Their ability to move money, set up front companies, and maintain their elaborate deception networks. Every bank account, every shell company, every financial channel became a potential trap. I've studied cyber warfare for years, and I've never seen this level of coordinated international response. This wasn't just about stopping hackers. This was about dismantling an entire state-sponsored cyber operation that was funding weapons of mass destruction. What we're seeing with these North Korean IT workers isn't just another cybercrime operation. It's another phase in the evolution of cyber warfare. These operators create fake personas that exist in the corporate world but are completely fabricated. They're using laptop farms to route their traffic through US-based locations and employing a full suite of remote management tools. Tools like GoToRemote, LogMeIn, GoToMeeting, Chrome Remote Desktop, AnyDesk, TeamViewer, RustDesk. You've probably used one of these before. They're even using mouse-jiggling software like Caffeine to appear active across multiple systems simultaneously. But the coordination is simply unmatched. These operators aren't working in isolation. They're referring each other to companies, creating networks of seemingly legitimate references. When they do have to show their faces, they're using AI tools and split-cam software to maintain their deception during video calls. The end game has evolved too. It's not just about infiltrating companies anymore. These aren't smash-and-grab operations. They're sophisticated long-term infiltrations that can last months or years before the attack is revealed. I've studied cyber operations for years, but this campaign represents something new. It's the perfect fusion of both social engineering and technical expertise. Every legitimate business tool, every standard corporate practice has been turned into a weapon. If you're a manager, imagine the next time when your new remote employee signs in from Chicago, for example. How can you be sure they're really there? When they turn on their camera for a team meeting, how can you know it's really them sitting there? The tools of deception have become so sophisticated that distinguishing truth from fiction is increasingly difficult. And with the path we're on with artificial intelligence, I'm expecting that within the next 2 years, this reality is going to be simply indistinguishable from real life. So I want you to just remember that these aren't just hackers trying to steal credit card numbers. These are elite North Korean hackers, backed by the full might of Kim Jong-un with one goal in mind: to secure funding for weapons of mass destruction through avenues like corporate infiltration. They're turning our own digital infrastructure against us in ways we're only beginning to understand. Never believe anything you see on the internet. What you're seeing isn't always what's real, and sometimes the most dangerous threats aren't the ones trying to break into your systems. They're the ones you've already invited in. Welcome to the new normal of cyber warfare. The question isn't whether these attacks will continue, it's whether we can locate them all before it's too late. I have a funny question for you. Have you ever suspected anyone at your company of being a North Korean hacker? Maybe. Just maybe. In the ever-evolving world of cybersecurity, there's a constant battle between hackers and defenders that most people never see. I'm about to tell you about a truly disgusting discovery that rippled through the security community. A tool that could effectively render our most sophisticated antivirus systems blind and deaf. In early 2023, Trend Micro's threat hunting team uncovered something that would make any security professional's blood run cold. EDR Silencer. Now I know what you're thinking. What's the big deal about another hacking tool? Well, imagine your organization's security system like an advanced military base. At every entry point, you've got guards. We call these endpoint detection and response systems, or EDRs. They are essentially the modern-day antivirus solutions. This software monitors everything happening on your computers, constantly sending reports back to their command center. They're your first line of defense against cyber attacks, malware, ransomware, you name it. Think of EDRs as security cameras with brains. They don't just watch, they analyze, report, and can even stop threats in real time. Every suspicious file opened, every unusual network connection, every potential threat, they see it all and report it back to their central command console. But EDR Silencer, this tool does something incredibly clever and incredibly dangerous. Using a legitimate Windows feature called the Windows Filtering Platform, it can completely silence these EDR systems. It's like blocking the radio frequency between your security guards and their command center. They're still standing there, but they can't call for backup or report what they're seeing. What makes this particularly interesting and concerning is that EDR Silencer isn't some black market tool. It's an open source project, freely available on GitHub, inspired by another tool called Fireblock. The author essentially took a closed source concept and made it available to everyone. By now, you're most likely aware of the red teams. They're hackers, but they're good hackers who test corporate security by trying to break in. They use tools like this to simulate real attacks. But when these tools become public, they don't just stay in the hands of corporate security professionals. Think about the implications. Every organization running EDR solutions, which is pretty much every major company today, suddenly has to contend with the possibility that their security systems could be rendered useless. The eyes and ears of the company's network could be blinded and deafened, and they wouldn't even know it was happening. The tension in the security community is clear. Security teams are racing to understand and defend against this new threat, while potential attackers are likely already figuring out how to incorporate it into their arsenals. It's a perfect example of how the cybersecurity landscape can shift dramatically with the release of a single tool. And this is just the beginning of the story. Wait until you see just how this thing works. Now, let me show you exactly that, because this is super important. You know how I mentioned it's like cutting communication between security guards and their command center? Well, I wasn't lying. Windows has this built-in feature called the Windows Filtering Platform, WFP for short. Think of it as a traffic cop for your computer's network communications. It's designed to help legitimate software control network traffic, but in this case, it's being used for something far more sinister. EDR Silencer uses WFP to identify and target specific security processes. And we're not talking about small-time security tools here. This thing can silence some of the biggest names in the industry: Microsoft Defender, SentinelOne, Palo Alto Networks Cortex XDR, Cisco Secure Endpoint, practically every major EDR solution you can think of. The tool's command interface is deceptively simple. With a single command, which is block EDR, it automatically hunts down and blocks all EDR processes it can find. It's particularly dangerous because it blocks both IPv4 and IPv6 communications. For those of you wondering why that matters, imagine trying to stop someone from calling for help. If you only disconnect their phone line, but they still have their cell phone, they can still get a message out. By blocking both IPv4 and IPv6, EDR Silencer cuts off all possible communication channels. The sophistication doesn't stop there. The tool includes a custom implementation of something, shown here, which allows it to dynamically identify running EDR processes. In simpler terms, it can find security tools even if they're trying to hide or use different names. Oh yeah, it's super flexible too. Did I forget to mention? Let's say you want to block a specific security process. Just use the block command with the full path. Need to cover your tracks? Unblock All removes all the filters you've created. It's like having a universal mute button for security systems. To really understand the impact, imagine you're running a large corporate network. Your EDR systems are your early warning system for cyber attacks. Now imagine those systems are still running, still using CPU cycles, still appearing to work normally, but they can't send any alerts about what they're seeing. Your security team would have no idea they've essentially been blindfolded. This tool is incredibly difficult to detect while it's operating. It uses legitimate Windows functionality, so it doesn't set off the usual alarm bells that malicious software might trigger. It's like a perfect crime. The security cameras are still running, but the footage never makes it to the security office. The list of affected EDR products reads like a who's who of enterprise security. The ones I mentioned before, plus Carbon Black, Trend Micro Apex One, 40 EDR. I could go on. Each of these products represents thousands of protected endpoints across countless organizations, all potentially vulnerable to this technique. This is where the true impact becomes clear. Organizations invest millions in security infrastructure, building sophisticated defense systems with multiple layers of protection. But with a tool like EDR Silencer, attackers can effectively neutralize a critical layer of that defense, creating a blind spot large enough to drive a cyber attack through. And trust me, that's exactly what some people are planning to do. I mentioned before how this tool was based off something called Fireblock. Well, imagine having a master key that can unlock 600 different doors. That's essentially what Fireblock brought to the table, with its massive database of EDR process names. When most malicious software runs on your computer, it creates what we call a process creation event. Think of it like leaving footprints in the sand. Security tools can spot these footprints and raise the alarm. But Fireblock, it does something incredibly clever. Instead of creating a new process, Fireblock executes within an existing process thread. It's like a secret agent changing clothes to blend in with the crowd rather than walking in through the front door. No new process means no footprints, and no footprints means no alerts. But the evolution didn't stop there. Enter Nighthawk version 0.2.6. Every program running on your computer has what we call call stack. Think of it like a paper trail showing exactly what the program has been doing. Security tools analyze these call stacks to spot suspicious behavior. But Nighthawk introduced something called call stack masking. It makes malicious operations appear completely legitimate to any security tool that's looking. It spoofs call stacks to appear as legitimate functions. But perhaps the most devious feature is something called module stomping. Every program on your computer is made up of various modules. Think of them as building blocks. Module stomping is like secretly replacing these legitimate building blocks with malicious ones, but keeping the original wrapper. When security tools look at these modules, they see what appears to be normal, legitimate code. The combination of these techniques, in-memory execution, call stack masking, and module stomping, represents EDR evasion in a nutshell. What we're watching is a predator evolve better camouflage, sharper teeth, and more silent footsteps all at once. The rapid evolution of these tools shows us something crucial about the state of cybersecurity. It's not just about building better walls anymore. Our adversaries are developing crazy smart ways to make their activities invisible. And it's awful when you realize these techniques aren't just theoretical. They're being actively used and improved in the wild. Trend Micro's internal telemetry started picking up something disturbing. Threat actors weren't just studying EDR Silencer, they were actively incorporating it into their attack strategies. This wasn't just a proof of concept anymore. It was becoming a weapon. Let me walk you through what a modern cyber attack chain looks like, because this is crucial to understanding the tool and its effectiveness. First, attackers discover and identify their targets and map out their network. Then comes execution, launching their attack tools against the target. If they're successful and they get in, they'll perform privilege escalation. Imagine getting promoted from regular employee to system administrator. That's what they do. But they're promoting themselves. Finally comes the impact, the actual damage they intend to cause. The Trend Micro team needed to know exactly how effective EDR Silencer could be. So they did something bold. They tested it against their own security systems. In their own controlled environment, they launched a ransomware binary, essentially a piece of malicious software that encrypts all your files and demands payment. Under normal circumstances, this would trigger multiple alerts, set off every alarm in their security console. But with EDR silencer running, complete silence. The security portal showed the device as simply being inactive, as if nothing was happening at all. This is like a bank's security system continuing to show empty hallways while robbers are siphoning out the loot. The security system isn't broken, it's still running. The robbers have masked the security cameras, like what they do in the movies. As the team dug deeper, they started testing EDR silencer against their Vision 1 endpoint agent. On their first attempt using the block EDR command, something interesting happened. Some traffic still got through. A few executable files weren't included in EDR silencer's hard-coded list. This was good news. They found an area that the tool missed, but it didn't really matter, because in reality, if no one knows these symptoms, what the behavior of antivirus systems are when they're being throttled by such a tool, then likely it's too late. The hackers are already in your network. Organizations worldwide rely on EDR systems as their primary defense against cyber attacks. These systems are supposed to be the early warning signs. EDR silencer doesn't just bypass these defenses, it blindfolds them. The security community is now in a race against time. They know the tool works. They know hackers are currently using it, and they know that every organization running an EDR solution, which is virtually every major company and institution, is seriously vulnerable. The question isn't whether we'll see this tool used in major attacks. The question is, how many attacks using EDR silencer have already happened? If you thought it was all doom and gloom, then take a deep breath because not all hope is lost. While EDR silencer represents a significant threat, the security community isn't standing still. In fact, they're fighting back with something that might surprise you: behavioral analysis. Think about how law enforcement catches sophisticated criminals. They don't just look for fingerprints. They study patterns, behaviors, and methods. That's exactly what some EDR tools are implementing. Behavioral analysis and monitoring systems. It doesn't just look for a specific piece of malware. It watches for suspicious behaviors or a combination of unusual actions that might indicate something's wrong. But having just one way to catch a threat is like having only one lock on your door. That's why we implement what we call defense in depth. If you're unfamiliar, then imagine you're protecting a medieval castle. You don't just have a wall, you have a moat. Multiple walls, guard towers, and different layers of defenses. If an attacker gets past one layer, they face another and another. That's exactly what a lot of the big companies are implementing into their networks. The first layer is network segmentation. Think of it like keeping different departments of your organization in separate, secure areas. Even if attackers breach one section, they can't easily move to others. Then there's the principle of least privilege. Every user and program only gets the exact permissions they need to do their job. Nothing more. You only get to enter one door at a time. But behavioral analysis systems are going to be the future, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence. These systems just don't look for threats. They look for patterns of movement that don't make sense. When EDR silencer tries to interfere with security processes, these systems will be able to flag the behavior and stop it dead in its tracks. I imagine if the system had a brain, it would be asking questions like, why is this person trying to access the production databases at 3 a.m. when they've never done that before? The multi-layered security controls work together in concert. If an attacker manages to slip past one defense, they trigger another. If they try to disable one security measure, another one catches them in the act. I think you get the idea. While tools like EDR silencer represent a significant threat, they're also pushing us to evolve network defenses in ways that might not have happened otherwise. It's beautiful, unfolding before our eyes. And remember, I'm here to take you along this journey. The key takeaway here is that what I've shown you today with EDR silencer isn't just a single story. It's a snapshot of a much larger picture. Security teams and myself are monitoring these developments in real time. Every new attack tool, every new evasion technique gets analyzed and studied. It's no longer enough to just monitor and respond. We're moving into an era where the distinction between offensive and defensive security is a slippery slope, because the same techniques that red teams use to test defenses are being adopted by actual attackers. EDR Silencer isn't just a tool. It's a warning sign of where cybersecurity is headed. The future won't be won by building better walls, but by building smarter ones. Walls that can think, adapt, and evolve just as quickly as the threats trying to bypass them. As I stand here in the hacker gallery, I can't help but wonder, what do you think of EDR Silencer? Have you ever used this tool? Will you? If you said yes, I hope it is for good. Don't end up as a face on the news and a life behind bars. Welcome to the Hacker Gallery. I'm the operator, and tonight we're diving into a story that shows just how vulnerable developers can really be. Go grab some popcorn, you're going to need it. Imagine a tool so trusted, so fundamental to modern software development, that it's been downloaded over 200 million times. That tool is Fabric, a Python-based system that developers use every day to build and deploy the applications you depend on. If you've ever used a news website, accessed a cloud service, or interacted with a modern web application, chances are Fabric played a role in making it happen. When developers build software, they don't create everything from scratch. They use packages, pre-built components that handle common tasks. Fabric is like the master key that lets developers automate their most critical operations, especially when it comes to deploying code across servers. Since 2008, it's been under the same trusted management, becoming the go-to tool for Python developers worldwide. Here's what you need to understand about software supply chains. Every application is built on trust. When developers use a package like Fabric, they're trusting not just the code, but the entire ecosystem around it. They trust the package repository. They trust the update system. They trust that when they type Fabric into their installation command, they're getting the real thing. But what happens when that trust is exploited? When attackers find ways to poison not just the code, but the very infrastructure we use to distribute it? What I'm about to show you isn't just another hack. It's a story of how attackers evolved from simple deception to something far more insidious, combining traditional malware with blockchain technology to create an attack that would prove nearly impossible to shut down. And it all started with a single package that was playing dress-ups to look identical to Fabric. As we unlock this case file, you'll see just how vulnerable our software supply chains have become, and why the next generation of cyber attacks might be impossible to stop using traditional methods. Let me show you how it unfolded. In January 2021, a new package appeared on PyPI, Python's main software repository. Its name, Fabrice. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Just another development tool in an ocean of software packages. But what nobody realized at the time was that this wasn't just another package. It was the beginning of one of the most persistent and sophisticated supply chain attacks we've seen in recent times. Let me explain something called typo squatting. You know how when you're typing fast, you might hit the wrong key or add an extra letter. Attackers count on developers making these same mistakes. They create malicious packages with names very similar to popular ones. Fabric becomes Fabrics. React becomes React with 2 T's. One tiny change that's easy to miss when you're rushing to meet a deadline. For 2 years, this package sat there, quietly collecting AWS credentials from every system it was installed on. Think about that. While developers were copying and pasting installation commands, while system administrators were updating their tools, this imposter package was silently stealing the keys to their AWS environment. The socket research team finally discovered the truth, but by then, the damage was done. Over 37,000 downloads, each one potentially compromising AWS credentials. all being funneled through a VPN server at this IP address. Thing is, it stayed hidden for so long because when it was first uploaded, the advanced scanning tools we use today didn't exist. Even when they were deployed, they were looking forward, not backward. If you aren't too familiar with cloud networks like Amazon's AWS, Microsoft's Azure, or the Google Cloud, for example, well, listen carefully. You need credentials to be able to access them, obviously. In this case, AWS credentials allow attackers to authenticate to their environment and access databases and sensitive information. They can rack up massive bills, steal data, or even use your infrastructure to attack others. And because this package looks so legitimate, security tools wouldn't flag the credential access as suspicious. It's exactly what the real Fabric package would do. But this was just the beginning. As we dug deeper into the code, we found something that would change everything we thought we knew about supply chain attacks. The attackers weren't just stealing credentials. They were building something much bigger, something that would prove almost impossible to stop. But the Fabric package wasn't just stealing credentials. It was setting up shop in the very heart of these systems. And it did it with a level of sophistication that honestly shocked me when I first saw the code. Let me show you how deep this rabbit hole goes. On Linux systems, the backbone of most cloud infrastructure, the malware immediately got to work creating what looked like a legitimate VS Code directory. Now, if you're not familiar with VS Code, it's one of the most popular development tools out there. The attackers knew this, and they used it as perfect cover. What you need to understand about malware persistence is that it's all about blending in. The attackers hid their malicious code in this directory shown here, a path that looks completely legitimate to most system administrators. They even split their payload into multiple encoded shell scripts, making it harder to see and examine. But the attackers weren't satisfied with just compromising Linux systems. They crafted a completely separate attack chain for Windows machines. And this is where their brilliance really shows through. On Windows, they pulled off a 3-stage attack that would make most malware developers jealous. First, they drop an encoded Visual Basic script. That's already suspicious enough to trigger most antivirus software, right? Wrong, because it looked like a normal Visual Basic script, the kind Windows uses all the time. This script would then launch a hidden Python program, which in turn would download what appeared to be chrome.exe into the user's downloads folder. Now, here's the clever part. They set up a Windows scheduled task to run this fake Chrome executable every 15 minutes. Even if you rebooted your system, even if you thought you'd cleaned everything up, it would just keep coming back. This is what we call multi-platform persistence. The attackers didn't just create malware. They created an adaptive system that could survive and thrive in any environment it landed in. They understood that modern development happens across multiple platforms, and they built their attack to follow developers wherever they went. Every line of code in this attack was custom built, and every step was calculated. The attackers were pulling data back to a single command and control server, shown here. But they were about to evolve their infrastructure into something far more resilient. Remember how I mentioned blockchain earlier? Well, this is where our story takes an unexpected turn, and where traditional cybersecurity measures start to break down completely. Just when security researchers thought they had a handle on supply chain attacks, everything changed. Cybersecurity researchers uncovered something unprecedented, a massive malware campaign that completely rewrote the rules of engagement. Instead of using traditional command and control servers, these attackers engineered something far more resilient, a blockchain-based control system. In a typical attack, defenders can shut down malware by blocking or seizing the command servers. It's like cutting off the head of a snake. But these attackers, they built their command infrastructure directly into Ethereum smart contracts, pieces of code that live on the blockchain itself. You can't shut down the blockchain. You can't seize it. It just keeps running. The campaign targeted about 100 different NPM packages, like Husky, for example, a NPM package that allows you to manage Git hooks easily. It targeted these packages by creating similar packages with similar names, just spelt slightly differently. This is an example of some of the fraudulent packages shown on screen. Notice those names? They're deliberately similar to legitimate blockchain development tools. But here's where it gets interesting. Their command and control server, running on port 1337, wasn't the real center of operations. It was just a relay point. The true commands were coming from the blockchain itself. We're witnessing the evolution of supply chain attacks in real time. Traditional defense mechanisms, blocking IP addresses, taking down servers, even seizing infrastructure, they're becoming obsolete against these blockchain-based threats. The attackers have essentially created an unkillable command center. These attackers have shown us a new playbook, one that combines the trustworthy appearance of legitimate package names with the unstoppable nature of blockchain technology. They're not just hiding in the supply chain anymore. They're embedding themselves in cryptocurrency blockchains, the very infrastructure we are using to build the future of the world and the internet. Scary stuff, if you ask me. But the hackers behind this disgusting campaign were professionals. Sadly, analysis of their blockchain transactions showed that their wallets were linked to an attack which managed to drain approximately $26 million from the cryptocurrency exchange Fixed Float's cryptocurrency wallets. Let me walk you through what happened. The attackers exploited vulnerabilities in Fixed Float's security structure, specifically targeting their Bitcoin and Ethereum holdings. Of that $26 million, $4.8 million in Ethereum was immediately moved to a cryptocurrency exchange called EXCH. But here's where it gets interesting. I've been tracking the movement of these funds, and what I'm seeing is a masterclass in cryptocurrency laundering. The funds didn't move in a straight line. They bounced through a carefully orchestrated series of wallets, starting from Fixed Float's address, moving through the initial attacker wallet, then through multiple intermediary addresses, before finally reaching their destination. What's particularly concerning is that one of these addresses that you see here, it has a history. That's right. These guys didn't perform one or two, but many different attacks. And their cryptocurrency address has been linked to multiple crypto scams and controversial hacking campaigns. This wasn't their first rodeo. Now, I need you to understand something crucial about this attack. While Fixed Float is a non-custodial exchange, which is a cryptocurrency exchange that does not hold the user's coins or tokens, it means that customer funds weren't at risk. However, the theft still disrupted their operations. 30 outstanding orders couldn't be processed. But here's what keeps me up at night: the sophistication of this operation. The attackers didn't just exploit technical vulnerabilities. They understood the blockchain ecosystem intimately. They knew how to move large amounts of cryptocurrency without setting off immediate alarms. They used smart contracts, not just as tools, but as weapons. When Fixed Float's team admitted to insufficient protection in its security structure, they weren't just making excuses, they were acknowledging a harsh reality. Even professional cryptocurrency exchanges can fall victim to attackers who are this well-prepared and technically proficient. Luckily for us, these hackers left behind some clues about who they really were. Let me show you what I found. The infrastructure behind this attack was like a Russian nesting doll of deception. You know, those wooden dolls that have decreasing size dolls placed inside each other. First layer, a VPN server in Paris, operated by M247, a very large internet service provider, which is used by almost all major VPN providers. Second layer, a command and control server running on port 1337, and the same port number we saw in the previous attack by them, which by now is like this hacker's calling card. And the final layer, that brilliant blockchain integration we've been talking about. But here's where it gets really interesting. While analyzing the malicious code, the research teams found something the attackers didn't mean to leave behind. Error messages written in Russian, right there in the code. An installation error, and an IP address retrieval error. This is what they looked like. Now, I want you to understand something about modern cyber attacks. When attackers build infrastructure this sophisticated, they usually scrub it clean of any identifying marks. But sometimes, in the complexity of it all, they make mistakes. These Russian language strings aren't just random artifacts, they're glimpses into the development environment where this malware was created. It's clear that these guys are Russian hackers. The command and control server you see here was particularly clever. Running on a non-standard port, it was designed specifically to evade traditional security monitoring. So, yeah, even the most sophisticated attackers can't hide everything. Sometimes, it's not the complex technical traces that reveal them. It's the simple human elements, like forgotten error messages in their native language. What we're witnessing here is more than just another cyber attack. Think about how these attacks have progressed. We started with traditional supply chain compromises, typo-squatting attacks targeting both Python and NPM packages, stealing AWS credentials, deploying cross-platform malware. That alone was sophisticated. But then these attackers did something unprecedented. They weaponized blockchain technology. Honestly, traditional defense mechanisms are becoming obsolete. When attackers use blockchain for command and control, you can't just shut down their servers. You'd need to restrict much more than just a blockchain address in a network, due to the nature of how this technology works. You might need to block Ethereum from your network entirely, because when they integrate smart contracts into their infrastructure, you can't just block their communication channels. And when they deploy cross-platform malware through trusted package managers, you can't just scan for suspicious files. The Russian language artifacts we found in the code, well, yeah, these guys likely reside in Russia, and due to that, you're probably not going to see any major arrests or investigations into them. But it's a reminder that even the most sophisticated attackers are human. They make mistakes. They gave away their country of origin. Or, this could be intentional. Maybe they wanted us to find it, to mask their true origin, and they're throwing us off their trail. This is the thing about cybersecurity. The truth is often shrouded in many layers of mystery and deceit. It's really hard to know for sure. This is the new era, where cyber attacks are becoming hard to track and are virtually unstoppable. The combination of supply chain compromises and blockchain-based command and control creates this extremely complex attack infrastructure that is definitely ahead of the curve right now. As these attacks evolve, our entire approach to defense needs to evolve with them. Because right now, the attackers aren't just playing chess, they're changing the rules of the game entirely. Let me know what you think about the blockchain, and if you ever thought about its use in cyber attacks. I bet you didn't think about that when you were busy buying Dogecoin. 2017 marked the emergence of something different. Security researchers investigating a strain of Ramnet banking malware discovered an unexpected passenger hiding within its code. They called it NGIO Web. Banking malware like Ramnet isn't just your average computer virus. It's specifically designed to steal financial information, targeting the online avenues where your money travels. But NGIO Web, it was playing a longer, crazier game. What we found was a botnet. And if you're not familiar with that term, imagine a puppet master controlling thousands of infected computers simultaneously. Each compromised system becomes part of a vast network, ready to execute commands from the operator that controls it. In NGIO Web's case, the initial army numbered around 3,000 infected systems, each one controlled through hard-coded command and control URLs. The technical fingerprints were there from the start. The malware's code paths included telltale markers like metric and min.js, seemingly innocent file names that masked their true purpose. But what truly caught our attention was the code itself. Over the next 7 years, it would remain largely unchanged, suggesting this wasn't some quickly assembled threat. This was carefully crafted and was here to stay. I've seen countless malware operations come and go, but NGIO Web was different. That initial discovery of 3,000 infected systems, that was just the beginning. As we'd soon learn, we weren't just watching the birth of another botnet. We were witnessing the emergence of a great threat. And trust me, you're going to want to hear what happened next. By 2022, what started as a 3,000-strong botnet had evolved into something far-reaching. The operators of NGIO Web were now boldly advertising their creation on BlackCat forums, boasting control of 14,000 systems. But it wasn't just about the numbers. It was how they got there that really caught my attention. Let me take a moment to explain something crucial here. In the early days, NGIO Web used hard-coded command and control URLs. Basically, fixed addresses programmed right into the malware. Think of it as having your headquarters at a permanent address. The problem? Once we security researchers found those addresses, we could shut them down. I could just add their IP addresses and the domain names to my network's blacklist, and the threat would be eradicated. But then something changed. The operators implemented what we call a domain generation algorithm, or DGA. Instead of fixed addresses, the malware now automatically generates new random domain names every day. Imagine trying to track someone who changes their address constantly, using a mathematical formula that only they know. But they didn't stop there. The malware added DNS text record verification, a clever way to prevent security researchers from disrupting the botnet through a technique we call sinkholing. You see, the operators added what we call DNS text record verification as a defensive maneuver. When a computer gets infected with NGIO Web, it won't blindly connect to just any command server. Instead, it performs a complex verification process before it tries to connect. First, it looks for two specific pieces of information in the domain's DNS records. Think of them as a sort of signature. These signatures are encrypted using a special key that only the malware knows. When decrypted, they must match a specific fingerprint which is based on both the domain name and the server's IP address. Why does this matter? The issue is that when they sinkhole the domain, the infected machines will still try to find and verify these special text records. But at the new redirected location, these text records either won't exist at all or won't contain the correct encrypted data, because only the hackers can create valid encrypted data using their secret key. Plus, even if the original text records somehow remained, they wouldn't be valid anymore, because the IP address has changed due to the redirection. Long story short, infected machines simply refuse to connect to sinkhole domains, rendering this traditional takedown method ineffective. They even deployed two different variants with distinct encryption methods, making analysis twice as challenging. I've seen countless malware operations evolve, but the strength of this botnet was evident in every modification. They changed their file paths to include innocent-looking names like these shown on screen. These names would blend in with legitimate web traffic. But this was just the beginning. As I tracked NGIO Web's evolution, I watched it transform from a banking threat into something far more insidious. The operators began targeting devices you probably have in your home right now. You see, your router, that innocent-looking box blinking away in the corner, it became their prime target. Netgear routers, in particular, caught their attention, making up 10% of their entire botnet. But they didn't stop there. Zixel networking equipment, Real-Link security cameras, even Nito vacuum cleaners, all fell into their crosshairs. These weren't random attacks. The operators were specifically hunting for devices running vulnerable or discontinued web application libraries. They deployed dedicated scanning servers. Think of them as wolves that would sniff out their prey. Operating from two specific IP addresses, these scanners were relentless, probing 5 specific network ports. One particularly devastating example was their exploitation of the linear eMerge E3 series access control systems, a vulnerability known as CVE 2019-7256. They could completely compromise these security systems. While you're reading this, thousands of these devices are actively scanning for their next targets, expanding the botnet's reach deeper into our homes and businesses. The operators had evolved from stealing banking information into growing the biggest and baddest botnet out there. They were infrastructure hunters, and their botnet was growing fast. In late 2022, the operators of the botnet had their big breakthrough. They had control of a portion of computers across the entire internet, and they thought to themselves, how can we profit from this? The thing is, the NGIO web operators had pulled off a pretty impressive feat, except they were chasing the dragon. They were chasing it hard. They weren't content with just controlling hacked devices, so they launched NSOCs, a sophisticated proxy service that would transform their botnet into a commercial enterprise. You know, those devices we talked about earlier. The routers, cameras, and other compromised systems, NSOCs turn them into what we call SOC 5 proxies. Think of each infected device as a mask. Each device in the botnet could become its own little hiding ground for hackers. Do you understand it now? They were allowing hackers to route their criminal internet traffic through a victim's network. Like your own home network, for example. Basically, by purchasing their service, hackers could hide their online activities and make their nefarious activities appear to come from somewhere legitimate. This is a big problem for law enforcement or security researchers because it's basically a dead end. It becomes another layer of deception and makes analyzing the origins of the traffic extremely hard, or sometimes even impossible. In other words, this was the emergence of a huge criminal proxy service. If you've watched my videos before, you'll be aware of criminal services like these. Check out the hackers that people don't talk about if you want to see us uncover the true identity behind Faceless, another criminal proxy service. Anyway, let's get back to the story. Do you want to know the scale of NSOCs? Absolutely massive. NSOCs offered approximately 35,000 proxies spread across 180 countries. Even more shocking, 80% of these proxies came directly from the NGIO web botnet. But here's what really got my attention. The pricing. For as little as 20 cents to $1.50, anyone could buy 24-hour access to these infected machines. The service was disturbingly user-friendly. Buyers could choose proxies by location, down to the specific city or zip code, select their preferred ISP, specify connection speeds, and even pick the type of infected device they wanted to use. All transactions were conducted in Bitcoin and Litecoin, providing yet another anonymity layer for both buyers and sellers. Imagine if your network was a part of this botnet. When criminals used these proxies, their malicious traffic appeared to come from legitimate residential addresses. Your address, your network, your digital fingerprint. It's really scary to think about, and you could be blissfully unaware. So what was originally banking malware has now turned into a full-fledged cybercrime marketplace, turning thousands of compromised devices into a global network of disguises. And as we would soon discover, some of their customers had much bigger plans than simple cybercrime. By 2023, what started as a simple banking malware had evolved into something truly monstrous. The botnet had exploded to nearly 30,000 compromised systems, but that wasn't what kept me up at night. It was who was using them. Before I tell you, I want you to visualize the infrastructure they've built. Picture 180 back-connect nodes serving as entry and exit points, all coordinated by a central control node at this IP address. Add to that 15 to 20 loader nodes, all communicating through standard web and FTP ports. 80 and 21. That's right. When you analyze the internet traffic from the botnet, you just see simple traffic that most computers use. They were hiding in plain sight, their traffic blending perfectly with legitimate internet activity. They had managed to create a geographically diverse web of infected computers. 13,056 systems in the United States, 4,236 in the United Kingdom, 2,286 in Canada, and 605 in Japan. But here's where it gets dark. While tracking this network, researchers discovered something truly terrifying. It wasn't just being used by everyday cyber criminals. It was being used by a military. APT-28, also known as Fancy Bear or Forest Blizzard, was using these compromised systems. APT-28 isn't your average cybercrime group. They're a nation-state actor, a Russian cyber espionage group. These are the people who target elections, critical infrastructure, and military installations. And here they were, utilizing this criminal botnet. They could be using your grandma's smart fridge to mask their espionage activities. Think about that for a second. Your router, your security camera, any of your smart devices. they weren't just being used by cybercriminals anymore. It had evolved into a national security threat, with state-sponsored hackers piggybacking on criminal infrastructure to spy on global targets. In November 2024, the cybersecurity community had to strike back. At this point, it had become clear there was a severe threat, and something needed to be done about it. Lumen's Black Lotus Labs, having mapped out the entire architecture of both NGIO Web and NSOCs, launched a coordinated offensive against the network. The team at Lumen identified every single command and control node in the network, the same nodes that were directing traffic from thousands of compromised devices. But they didn't act alone. They brought in the Shadow Server Foundation and other industry partners that fight cybercrime. Instead of trying to clean every infected device, which is an impossible task, by the way, they went straight for the throat. They released their research and known information about the Botnet to security companies worldwide. The security companies could now with confidence block traffic to and from the two networks, which effectively is like cutting off the botnet's head. A majority of services on the web, businesses, or your ISP, for example, would now be protected from traffic to and from this criminal proxy service. Both the original NGIO Web botnet and its commercial offspring, the NSOC service, found their communication channels suddenly severed. They released what we call indicators of compromise. Think of it as a digital fingerprint database that helps other security teams identify and block these threats on their own networks. This wasn't just about taking it down. It's about empowering the entire cybersecurity community to work together and fight back. While this operation has severely disrupted both networks, we're not dealing with amateurs here. These are sophisticated operators who've shown remarkable resilience over 7 years. They've adapted before, and they'll likely do it again. As time goes on, more and more smart devices will connect to the internet. More devices will become vulnerable. And the cycle goes on and on. You can bet this won't be the last we hear of operations like NGIO Web and NSOCs. This documentary on criminal proxy services shows us something else. Something more sinister than I initially thought when I started researching it. The truth is, we're entering dark times. We're in an era of cyber threats, an era where criminal infrastructure can be used for espionage, where your home router can become a weapon in a country's arsenal. You can't ever be 100% sure about your safety anymore when you go online. Everywhere I look within the darker corners of the internet, I seem to uncover worse and worse. The internet is and will continue to be used for much more horrific things than watching movies, playing video games, or talking to your friends. In saying that, stick around and find out what other secrets the internet has to offer. July 2022. While most of the world was focused on recovering from the pandemic, something far more sinister was taking shape within the internet. A new strain of ransomware emerged, one that would quickly prove itself to be different from anything we'd seen before. Let me tell you why this matters. See, this wasn't just another piece of malware. This was BianLian, and its creators made a fascinating choice right from the start. They built it using the Go programming language. Now, I need you to understand something about Go. It's like really good for coding malware. It's modern, fast, and incredibly difficult to detect. When malware developers choose Go, they did so with intent. They're building something meant to survive in the harshest network environments. BianLian employed AES 256 encryption, the same standard used by intelligence agencies to protect classified information. But what really caught my attention was its targeting system. This thing was designed to encrypt 1,013 different types of files. Think about that. Over 1,000 different ways to lock down a victim's data. After completing its encryption routine, BianLian would do something that showed just how sophisticated its creators were. It would delete itself. No evidence, no traces, nothing for investigators to analyze. Just a simple text file left behind with ransom instructions. I've seen thousands of malware samples in my time within the hacker gallery, but BianLian's initial appearance sent shivers down my spine. Because while most ransomware announces itself with a bang, BianLian moves like a ghost, striking with surgical precision before vanishing into thin air. But this was just the beginning. What happened next would transform this elegant piece of malware into one of the most feared cyber threats of our time. The BianLian Group's first major campaign revealed something sinister, that they weren't no amateur hackers. They were the best of the best. Let me walk you through their playbook. Their initial point of entry: Remote Desktop Protocol, RDP. Think of it as a door on the internet that lets you control a computer from anywhere in the world. The group didn't need to break down this door. They had keys purchased from access brokers on the dark web. But here's where they showed their true expertise. Once inside, they deployed what we call the proxy shell exploit chain. 3 critical vulnerabilities in Microsoft Exchange Server that, when combined, gave them ultimate access to the victim's network. This wasn't ordinary computer hacking. It was a methodical, planned, and precise operation. Now I need you to understand something crucial about their approach. The BianLian Group introduced what we call a double extortion model. This wasn't just about encrypting files anymore. They'd steal your data first, then encrypt it. Pay up, or they'd not only keep your systems locked, they'd leak everything they took. It was like having 2 guns to your head instead of 1. Their technical sophistication was remarkable. They deployed a suite of remote access tools: TeamViewer, Atera Agent, SplashTop, AnyDesk, creating multiple backdoors into compromised systems. Then, using PowerShell and Windows Command Shell, they systematically disabled security measures. Windows Defender, AMSI, Sophos Protection, all neutralized through precise Windows registry modifications. But what really set them apart was their targeting of ESXi infrastructure, the backbone of enterprise virtual machines and servers. Why would they target this? Well, you see, this wasn't random. This was calculated. Instead of going after individual computers, they were going after entire virtual environments that could host dozens or hundreds of systems. Compromising this crucial set of infrastructure within a network could lead to disastrous outcomes. I've seen countless ransomware operations, but this level of comprehensive system compromise, this wasn't just another cybercrime group. This was the emergence of a specialized hacking group, one that you probably have never heard about, and they were just getting started. Just when BianLian seemed unstoppable, the cybersecurity community struck back. Avast, one of the world's leading security companies, released something that would change the game for their victims. It was a free decryptor for BianLian's ransomware. Listen, I need you to understand why this was such a big deal. This wasn't just another security tool. This was the first real weapon against BianLian's encryption system, and it came with some serious capabilities. The decryptor was designed as a standalone executable, meaning you didn't need to install anything. In the middle of a ransomware crisis, when every second counts, this kind of simplicity could make the difference between saving your files and losing everything. The tool came with what we call password cracking capability. See, when BianLian encrypts files, it uses specific passwords. The Avast team had collected these passwords from previous attacks, and their tool could automatically try every known password until it found the right one. The decryptor needs something called an original encrypted file pair. Think about it this way. If you have one file that's been encrypted and its original unencrypted version, the tool can analyze them both to figure out exactly how BianLian encrypted your files. It's like giving the tool a Rosetta Stone for your encrypted data. The really clever part? Built-in backup features. Because here's something most people don't realize about decryption. If something goes wrong, you could lose your files forever. The Avast team knew this, so they made sure their tool would create backups before attempting any decryption. While this decryptor worked against known variants of BianLian, the group wasn't about to sit back and watch their ransomware become useless. Their response would force everyone watching to let out an audible gasp. Cyber security defenders were about to cry themselves to sleep. When faced with effective countermeasures, most cybercrime groups double down on their existing tactics, but not BianLian. They did something that caught the entire cybersecurity community off guard. They completely abandoned their encryption strategy. Let me explain. Instead of just locking up files, they shifted to pure data theft. And their new approach? It was brutal in its efficiency. Within 48 hours of breaching a network, that's just 2 days, they'd already have their victims' names posted on their leak site. Then they'd give them just 10 days to pay up before exposing everything. I've analyzed their technical evolution, and it's truly fascinating in its own brutal way. They deployed an arsenal of network scanning tools. Advanced Port Scanner, Soft, Perfect Network Scanner, SharpShare's Ping Castle. Each one designed for a specific purpose, working together to map out every corner of a victim's network. Their credential theft methods? Next level. They're using LSAS memory dumps to extract login credentials directly from a computer's memory. The RDP Recognizer tool to identify remote access points. NTDS.DET extraction to pull password data from domain controllers. And the Impacket toolset, a crucial tool for network analysis, letting them dig deeper into their victims' networks. What makes this evolution so significant is the psychological warfare aspect. Think about it, 48 hours. That's how long you have before your organization's name appears on their leak site. Then 10 days watching the clock tick down, knowing they have all your data, wondering what they'll expose first. You either pay up or succumb to whatever consequences may unfold for your business. In a lot of cases, the reputational damage alone is enough to destroy whatever's left of the business. One thing BianLian didn't change, though, was their infiltration techniques. They didn't really need to change this at all. All that technical expertise we saw in their earlier campaigns, it's still there. They just adapted it for a more targeted, more aggressive approach. They didn't just evolve, they transformed into something that's arguably far more dangerous. What I'm about to describe is perhaps the most sophisticated evolution of BianLian's operations, and it's absolutely disgusting. They've essentially created the perfect digital heist methodology. So, sit back and let me show you. First, they implemented something called ngrok and RSOCs, tools that mask their traffic through SOC 5 tunnels. Now, here's why this matters. Imagine trying to track a car that can instantly teleport between thousands of different roads. That's essentially what these tools do with their internet traffic. It makes their operations nearly impossible to trace. But here's where it gets really interesting. They discovered a vulnerability in Windows 10 and 11, CVE 2022-37969. When you're operating in a network, you're typically limited by your access level. What this exploit does is give them what we call privilege escalation, basically turning a regular user account into one with administrative powers. They could basically print themselves a key to every door in the building. Their evasion techniques? Next level. They used UPX packing to compress and obscure their tools. They hid their stolen data in places you'd never think to look, deep in system folders like program data/VMware, and even in the music folder on a computer. It's brilliant, because these are places that a cybersecurity analyst would usually be checking. Once they're in a victim's network, you might be asking, how do they get the data out? They managed to have data posted on the dark leak site within 2 days, and that's pretty fast. Well, they did it by using a combination of PowerShell scripts, powerful system commands, along with FTP, and a tool called rclone for data transfer. But here's the clever part. They're not just grabbing files randomly. They're creating their own administrator accounts, both locally and in Azure cloud systems, and installing what we call web shells on Exchange servers. This gives them persistent access. They can come and go as they please, taking whatever they want, whenever they want. The real genius is in their ability to hide in plain sight. Their network connections look legitimate because they're using standard business protocols like SMB. Their tools are renamed to look like system files. Everything they do is designed to blend in with normal network traffic. At this point in our story, BianLian are performing the craziest information heists all over the internet. And when you understand exactly their methodology, you realize that they're not just thieves. They're architects of chaos who've turned network infiltration into an art form. It's really scary stuff, and guess what? There's nothing you can do. The true scale of BianLian's capabilities became clear when they executed 3 devastating attacks. Let me walk you through these breaches, because each one reveals something crucial about their operation. First, Air Canada. The group didn't just breach their network, they extracted 210 gigabytes of data, SQL database backups containing customer information, internal security documentation, and detailed employee records. Then came Northern Minerals. What makes this breach particularly interesting is how it happened through their IT vendor. Think about that for a second. BianLian didn't just target the company directly. They found a weak link in their supply chain. The breach exposed corporate data, operational information, financial records, and sensitive personnel files. It was a masterclass in strategic targeting. But it's their attack on Boston Children's Health that really shows the true colors of these hackers. Listen, there is an unwritten rule in cybersecurity hacking. You never target hospitals, let alone children's hospitals. Doing so can be the difference between life or death. As you can see, BianLian truly has zero regard for anyone or anything, but healthcare organizations are perfect targets for 3 reasons. First, they're required by law to maintain access to patient records, which means they can't just shut down their systems. Second, the data they hold is incredibly sensitive and personal, which increases pressure to pay ransoms. And third, they often run legacy systems that can't easily be updated or replaced. After tracking BianLian throughout the internet for over a year, I now know exactly what we're dealing with. This isn't just another cybercrime group. This is a sophisticated operation with likely ties to Russia, using foreign language naming conventions to obscure their origins. But make no mistake, their geographical location is the least interesting thing about them. Since their emergence in 2022, BianLian has claimed 154 confirmed victims. BianLian has completely abandoned traditional ransomware encryption in favor of pure data theft. They're not interested in locking up your systems anymore. They want your data, and they've gotten incredibly good at taking it. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA for short, has laid out specific recommendations, and you need to pay attention to these. First, strictly limit remote desktop protocol access. RDP opens doors to your network, and BianLian has repeatedly proved it will use them as their way in. Secondly, you need to disable PowerShell and command line permissions for standard users. In the wrong hands, they're weapons. BianLian has consistently used these tools to move through networks undetected. BianLian is still at large. Although they have been attributed to Russia, their identities are completely unknown. BianLian's evolution shows no signs of slowing down. They've adapted to every countermeasure, improved their techniques with every operation, and demonstrated an uncanny ability to identify and exploit our most vulnerable systems. From their sophisticated Go-based ransomware to their current data theft operations, from their initial double extortion model to their current lightning-fast attack timeline. BianLian represents something we've never seen before. A threat actor that doesn't just adapt to our defenses, but anticipates them. Standing here in the hacker gallery, surrounded by the history of cyber threats. I can tell you this with certainty. BianLian is a preview of what's coming. If you're unfamiliar with cybersecurity, know that this is a brutal and vicious cybercriminal gang, and if we don't raise awareness on cybersecurity, then the future of the internet looks quite dismal. Tell a friend about what you learned today. It's the only way forward. September 2022 marked a pivotal moment in cybersecurity history. I want you to understand something crucial. When a ransomware group gets hacked, it's not just ironic, it's potentially catastrophic. That's exactly what happened when Lockbit, one of the most sophisticated ransomware operations in existence, suffered a devastating breach. A developer within their ranks, reportedly frustrated with the organization, didn't just leave. They leaked Lockbit's ransomware code. The code, which was for their ransomware builder, isn't just a single piece of malware. It's essentially a malware factory in a box. So what was actually leaked? The builder package contained 4 critical components. First, an encryption key generator, the backbone of any ransomware operation. Second, the builder executable itself. Third, a modifiable configuration file in JSON format. And finally, a batch file that brings it all together. But here's what makes this leak particularly dangerous: the level of customization it enables. Through that config JSON file, anyone with basic technical knowledge can modify everything from the ransom note to which processes get terminated on an infected system. They can even specify their own command and control servers, effectively creating their own unique strain of ransomware. I've seen plenty of malware leaks in my time analyzing cyber threats, but this one stood out to me. and you'll soon see why. When source code like this gets into the wild, it's like giving a blueprint for a weapon of mass destruction to anyone who wants it. The Lockbit builder wasn't just code. It was a framework anyone could now follow for their own attacks. Think about it. We always discuss how legitimate penetration tools get leaked to cybercriminals, and this creates a world of pain for network defenders worldwide, as the criminals have added yet another tool to their arsenal. But a tool that was designed by cybercriminals, made for cybercriminals? Well, that's a completely different story. So yeah, their got leaked. That's exactly what happened. What I'm about to tell you about the emergence of a group that goes by the name of Helldown Ransomware proves that sometimes the most dangerous threats don't come from sophisticated nation-states or elite hacker groups. They come from the tools these groups leave behind. On August 9th, 2024, almost 2 years after the leak, security researchers at Cypherma discovered a new ransomware operation had emerged from the shadows, and they called it Helldown. I've seen countless malware variants in my time, and let me tell you, this was a familiar face. The technical analysis was clear. Helldown wasn't just inspired by Lockbit. It was built directly from the leaked Lockbit 3.0 builder. This is exactly what we'd feared. Someone had taken those sophisticated tools and created something new. Something dangerous. Similar to other ransomware operations out there, Helldown had implemented what we call a double extortion strategy. They don't just encrypt your files and demand payment. First, they steal your data. Then, they encrypt everything. If you don't pay up, they threaten to publish everything they took on their .onion site. A secret website hidden within the deep web, virtually untraceable. By late August, not even a month later, their data leak site was already evolving, showing signs of an organized, sophisticated operation. Think about that. In less than a month, they went from emergence to full-scale operations. Cyberint's follow-up analysis in October confirmed what many of us feared. Helldown wasn't just a flash in the pan. They were here to stay. Just when security teams thought they had Helldown figured out, everything changed. On October 31st, 2024, yeah, Halloween of all days, 360net Labs security researcher Alex Turing made a chilling discovery. Helldown wasn't just targeting Windows anymore. They'd evolved. This new variant was specifically designed for Linux systems, but not just any Linux systems. We're talking about a sophisticated 237 kilobyte ELF executable file, targeting VMware installations. Now, if you're not familiar with virtual machines, or VMs, think of them as multiple computers running inside one physical server. These are the backbone of modern business infrastructure. What made this variant particularly nasty was its VM killing capabilities. The code contained a function called kill_VMs. And believe me, it did exactly what it says on the tin. Here's how it worked. First, it would run a command to list every single virtual machine on the system. Then, systematically, it would execute a kill command on each one, cycling through different kill types to ensure nothing survived. This kill VMs function wasn't just called once, it was invoked 3 times with different arguments, making sure absolutely nothing could escape. The attackers were going after the entire virtualized infrastructure. The technical specifications tell an even deeper story. This wasn't some rushed job. It was carefully crafted malware using sophisticated encryption methods. The cry-thread encryption component and bgen salsa key generation showed these attackers knew exactly what they were doing. I've seen a lot of malware evolve over the years, but this kind of rapid adaptation, going from a Windows-only threat to a sophisticated cross-platform attack tool in just months, that's something that had everyone paying attention. We were being given a preview of how modern ransomware operations adapt and grow in real time. When security researchers at Sequoia started connecting the dots, they discovered that at least 8 victims on Helldown's website had one thing in common. They were all using Zixel firewalls as their VPN access points. Now, obviously, this wasn't just a coincidence. Let me walk you through exactly how these attacks went down, because this is a masterclass in systematic network penetration. The attackers targeted Zixel firmware version 5.38, exploiting a vulnerability now known as CVE 2024-42057. Their first move? Uploading a configuration file named zzz1.conf and creating a user account with this username. Simple but effective. Once they had that foothold, they didn't just rush in. They used that account to establish an SSL VPN connection, basically a secure tunnel right into their target's network. Think of it as having a legitimate key to the front door. The tool selection here is what really shows their sophistication. They deployed Mimikatz to extract credentials from the Active Directory. That's like getting a master key to every room in the building. They downloaded Advanced Port Scanner directly from GitHub to map out the network. Then they used hrsword.eaxe to disable endpoint protection, literally turning off the security cameras. For movement through the network, they used a combination of RDP and Team Viewer. PsExec gave them the ability to execute commands across the network, completing their control. What makes this attack methodology particularly clever is how they blended custom tools with readily available software. Each tool had a specific purpose in their arsenal, and they used them with precision. I've analyzed hundreds of attack patterns, but this one stands out because Helldown's operators knew exactly how to get in, set up shop, make themselves at home, and prepare for something much bigger. By November 7th, 2024, Helldown had reached its terrifying peak. I want you to understand the sheer scale of these guys. 31 confirmed victims, primarily small and medium-sized businesses across the United States and Europe. Let's quickly look at 3 cases that show just how diverse and dangerous the attacks were. First, there's Schlattner Engineering in Osnabrück, Germany. This firm had been operating since 1986, building a reputation for excellence in engineering. In one attack, Helldown exfiltrated 53 gigabytes of their data. Decades of intellectual property just gone. Then we have the Coneiser Group, a prominent Lebanese company established in 1960. The attackers made off with 31 gigabytes of their data. But here's where it gets really concerning. General Dentistry for Children in San Ramon, California. We're talking about 62 gigabytes of sensitive pediatric medical records. That's not just data, that's children's private medical information. Helldown specifically targeted PDF files and scanned documents, focusing on D and E drives and network file sharing paths. They knew exactly what they were looking for and where to find it. But here's what really sets this campaign apart: the sheer volume of data they were willing to steal. While the average theft was around 70 gigabytes, some attacks resulted in data dumps of up to 431 gigabytes. That's a large-scale exfiltration. Most ransomware groups are selective about what they steal, but Helldown, they took everything they could get their hands on. By the time I'm telling you this story, that victim count of 31 has dropped to 28. That might sound like good news, but let me tell you what that really means. Those 3 organizations paid up. They had no choice. And the others, their data is still sitting on Helldown's leak site. This wasn't just another ransomware campaign. This was a demonstration of how vulnerable our interconnected world really is. When a single group can target engineering firms in Germany, businesses in Lebanon, and children's dental records in California all within the same campaign, that's when you know we're dealing with something unprecedented. When I dissected Helldown's code, what I found was chilling. As I mentioned before, they had 2 distinct variants, a Windows version and a Linux version, each precisely engineered for maximum damage. Let me take you inside this weapon, which closely resembles Lockbit's original builder. The Windows variant, a 653.50 kilobyte PE, 32 executable, might seem small, but don't let that fool you. Its first move, completely dismantling your safety nets. It executes 2 critical commands shown here. In plain English, it's destroying your system's shadow copies. Those automatic backups Windows creates to help you recover from exactly this kind of attack. This means exactly what you think it does. If you want your files, you'll have to scoff up some crypto. The malware's configuration is XOR encrypted with a key of 50. A simple but effective method to hide its true nature from security tools. Once decrypted, it launches a batch file from the program data directory. It systematically terminates processes that might interfere with its operation. It's like a surgeon methodically clearing their operating field. Except in this case, the surgery is definitely not beneficial. The Linux variant? That's a whole different animal. Instead of targeting individual computers, it goes after VMware ESX servers, the backbone of many corporate networks. It uses CSA PKCS1 encryption, a more sophisticated approach than its Windows counterpart. and includes specialized VM management capabilities. Think of it as the difference between targeting individual soldiers versus taking out the entire command center. What makes this malware particularly sophisticated, and I'm referring to the Windows variant here, is its registry modifications in the Windows software hive. These aren't random changes. They're calculated alterations designed to persist even after system reboots. I've analyzed countless pieces of malware in my career, and Helldown is the worst of the worst. It systematically eliminates every possible recovery option before it strikes. These hackers are playing chess while others are playing checkers, and they're several moves ahead. On September 3rd, 2024, Zixel did what any responsible tech company should do. They moved fast. They released firmware version 5.39, patching the CVE 2024-42057 vulnerability that Helldown had been exploiting. But here's what I need you to understand. In cybersecurity, patches are only as good as their implementation. The technical fix was straightforward enough. Update to the new firmware version. But Zixel didn't stop there. They pushed for a complete security overhaul, urging users to change their admin passwords immediately. A simple password change could be the difference between business as usual and a devastating breach. But here's the reality of it for small to medium businesses running Zixel firewalls. Their network security isn't too advanced yet. They might not have a cybersecurity analyst that can manage their firewalls 24/7. So for organizations that couldn't update immediately, Zixel recommended something drastic, completely disabling remote access until the patch could be applied. That's like telling a business to board up their windows during a hurricane. Sure, it might hurt operations temporarily, but it's better than total devastation. I've been watching threats evolve for years, and this situation perfectly illustrates the three critical layers of modern cybersecurity. First, you patch. That's your firmware update. Second, you change credentials. That's your new admin password. And third, you have an emergency protocol. In this case, disabling remote access if needed. But let me be absolutely clear about something. This isn't just about Helldown, and it's not just about Zixel firewalls. It's about the leaked malware code from the beginning. When a leaked builder from 2022 can evolve into a cross-platform threat by 2024, from a team of hackers that could be across the other side of the world, well, it tells us that there is too much opportunity for hackers in today's age. Today, it's Helldown targeting Zixel firewalls. Tomorrow, it could be something else. A 0-day could drop online, and companies and network defenders will have to go through it again and again. If you can't keep up, consider yourself compromised. Remember this: every patch you postpone, every update you delay, every security recommendation you ignore, that's not just a risk, it's an invitation. I hope you enjoyed the story of Helldown Ransomware. If you'd like to stay up to date with them, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm sure I'll be posting another video about them very, very soon. Let me tell you about one of the most fascinating and disturbing cybercrime groups I've ever analyzed. They're known by many names: Scattered Spider, Octopus, Octotempest. But what makes them truly remarkable isn't their branding, it's their audacity. Put yourself in the shoes of a cybersecurity analyst. You're handling a major breach at your company. You're on an emergency conference call discussing how to stop the attackers. But here's the thing: those attackers, they're listening to your call right now. They've already compromised your system so thoroughly that they're literally eavesdropping on your response plans. That's not science fiction. That's exactly what this group does. But here's what's even more fascinating. Many of these hackers are basically kids. The FBI has identified at least 12 members, some as young as 16 years old. Native English speakers who can navigate corporate IT systems like they built them themselves. They're part of what's known as the comm community, a loose network of highly skilled operators who've mastered the art of social engineering. They don't just hack systems, they hack people. They create perfect fake social media profiles, use AI to synthesize voices for impersonation, and manipulate their way through corporate help desks like they belong there. But don't let their youth fool you. They're methodical, patient, and terrifyingly effective. They understand that modern security isn't just about breaking through firewalls. It's about exploiting the human element while having the technical chops to back it up. So yeah, that's Scattered Spider in a nutshell. And well, as you're about to see, we're just breaking the ice. Just remember, when you combine young hackers with no sense of repercussions, extreme technical skill, and intimate knowledge of how corporations actually work, you get something like this. A group that will stop at nothing to get what they want. What I'm about to show you is the technical blueprint of one of the most sophisticated phishing operations I've ever analyzed. In March 2022, Scattered Spider launched the Octopus campaign, and it was truly a piece of work. A completely automated credential theft machine. Let me walk you through how they built it. I've analyzed their phishing operations, and the level of automation is impressive. They built these scam login pages, and all they needed to do was trick people to enter their account details into it. So they made their fake login pages look absolutely legitimate. They did it using Nuxt.js, a powerful tool that makes web development intuitive and powerful. But behind that pretty facade, they had a back-end with incredible flexibility to process stolen credentials in real time. The domain names they used? Pure psychological warfare. They followed specific patterns. company-sso.com, sso-company.net, or company-help.com. These weren't random choices. They specifically targeted single sign-on, or SSO services, making employees think they were logging into legitimate company portals. Every domain was carefully registered through Namecheap or Porkbun. Legitimate registrars that wouldn't raise immediate red flags. But the real genius was in their exfiltration system. When you entered your credentials on one of their fake pages, they weren't just being saved to a database. It was going to their Django backend servers on port 8080, which had a Telegram bot integration for real-time data extraction. The custom Telegram bot instantly delivered every captured username, password, and, this is crucial, two-factor authentication code directly to their phones. They could act on compromised credentials before the codes expired. The whole operation ran on DigitalOcean infrastructure, a legitimate cloud provider that gives you instant scalability. Think about that. They built a system that could handle thousands of victims simultaneously, all automated, all running 24/7. Here's what makes this infrastructure particularly frightening. It was pre-configured for rapid deployment. They could spin up new phishing sites targeting different companies in minutes, not hours or days. The moment a company detected and blocked one domain, 3 more would pop up. When you look at the technical sophistication here, the real-time credential harvesting, the automated 2FA code interception, the instant notification system, you start to understand why this group is as good as they are. This wasn't just another phishing campaign. This was an assembly line for corporate account takeovers. And remember, this was just their initial campaign. Their infrastructure would only get more sophisticated from here. On June 2nd, 2022, at exactly 9 a.m. Pacific time, thousands of employees across 3 major companies received an urgent text message. Your corporate account has been scheduled for deactivation. Immediate action required. What happened next would become one of the most successful credential harvesting operations I've ever analyzed. The group had set up 3 custom domains, each targeting a specific company. One ended in -octa.net, another in -vpn.net, and the third in -octa.com. 2 companies were in California's Central District. One was outside. But here's what makes this attack particularly fascinating. They weren't just after passwords. They were after something much more valuable. When employees clicked the links in those text messages, they were taken to perfect replicas of their company's Okta login pages. Okta, if you're not familiar, is what companies use for single sign-on. It's basically the last door to get through before having full access to an account. You see, getting past modern corporate security isn't just about stealing passwords. You need to bypass what we call multi-factor authentication, or MFA. Their system didn't just capture passwords. It harvested the MFA codes in real time. Remember that infrastructure I told you about earlier? This is where it paid off. Every time someone entered their credentials, an MFA code, it was instantly captured and validated. They could verify and use the stolen credentials before the MFA codes expired. By the end of that single morning, they had harvested 9,931 sets of user credentials. Think about that. Nearly 10,000 sets of corporate login details. But it gets worse. They captured 5,441 MFA codes and 3,129 corporate email addresses. And they didn't just compromise 3 companies. Through various connected systems and shared services, they gained potential access to 136 different organizations. What makes this attack particularly brilliant and I mean that in a technical sense, is how they used SMS messages instead of emails. Corporate email systems have sophisticated phishing filters. Text messages? Not so much. By shifting to SMS, they bypassed most of the standard corporate email scanning systems, which may have caught things like this. The real genius in this attack was in the timing. By hitting all three companies simultaneously, they overwhelmed the normal security response procedures. By the time any one company could alert the others, the damage was already done. It was a masterclass in hacking, and it marked a turning point in their operations. They had proved they could not just build sophisticated infrastructure, but use it to execute precisely timed, multi-target attacks at scale. They were just getting started. In early December 2022, the group executed what I consider their craziest hack yet, a 3-day cryptocurrency theft campaign that would net them nearly $2 million. But it wasn't just the amount they stole that was impressive. It was how they did it. Let me break down their playbook. For the sake of privacy, I'm going to refer to the victims with their initials only. First target, December 4th. They hit JL for $195,000. This was their test run. But 2 days later, they went for their main target, ML's Coinbase account. In a single transaction, they extracted 98.5 Bitcoin, worth $1.668 million at the time. The very next day, they hit JG, draining $40,000 worth of cryptocurrencies spread across 17 different types. They weren't using their previous phishing techniques anymore. They'd evolved to something much more sophisticated: SIM swapping. Instead of trying to intercept two-factor authentication codes, they simply took control of their victims' phone numbers. Let me explain how SIM swapping works. Every cell phone has a SIM card that connects it to the cellular network. What these hackers did was convince phone carriers that they were the legitimate owners of their target's phone numbers. Once they had control of the phone number, they could receive any authentication code sent to that number. But the SIM swap was just the beginning. They had to move fast. Cryptocurrency transfers are irreversible. The moment they gained access to a wallet, they initiated transfers through multiple addresses to obscure the money trail. Think of it like a shell game, but played at digital speed across the blockchain. The attack on JG was particularly sophisticated because it involved 17 different types of cryptocurrency. Each one had to be transferred through different pathways, using different wallet addresses, all coordinated to happen nearly simultaneously. Imagine it like a sick and twisted dance, financially choreographed. They'd move beyond simple credential theft to sophisticated financial system manipulation. They weren't just stealing passwords anymore. They were hijacking phone numbers, manipulating cryptocurrency exchanges, and orchestrating complex blockchain transactions. By this point, you'd think the group couldn't get any worse. Or could it? What if I told you this was just practice? They were about to take these same techniques: the phone system manipulation, the authentication bypass, the rapid system takeover, and apply them to something much bigger: corporate enterprise networks. The cryptocurrency campaign wasn't just about the money. It was their graduation exercise, and they passed with flying colors. In 2023, everything changed. Let me show you how they leveled up. First, they partnered with Alpha, or BlackCat, one of the most sophisticated ransomware operations in existence. Think of it as franchising for cybercrime. They got access to professional-grade ransomware and infrastructure, while Alpha got a cut of the profits. For anyone who isn't too familiar with hackers and cybercriminals, think of it like the two biggest, baddest villains teaming together. They started deploying Alpha, or BlackCat's ransomware, using something called Azure Data Factory. That's right, Microsoft's own cloud service to move stolen data. It's brilliant because it looks exactly like normal corporate data operations. When you're moving terabytes of data through official Microsoft channels, who's going to flag it as suspicious? Their social engineering went next level too. Remember those fake social media profiles from their early days? Now they were using AI to synthesize voices. They could call into corporate help desks sounding exactly like legitimate employees or executives. And they weren't just calling from anywhere. They were using residential proxy services like NSOCs and TrueSOCs. So their connections appeared to come from legitimate residential addresses in the target company's area. They didn't just breach systems, they lived in them. They manipulated email rules to hide their tracks, exploited VMware vCenter servers using a rootkit called bdevil, and most incredibly, They started joining their victims' incident response calls. Think about that. They were literally listening to security teams trying to stop them in real time. This all culminated in two of the most audacious attacks in cybercrime history. The MGM Casino and Caesars Entertainment breaches. These weren't just data breaches. They were complete takeovers of multi-billion-dollar casino operations. They could control door locks, security cameras, payment systems, everything. They created a playbook that could be used against any major corporation, anywhere in the world. The casino attacks weren't the end goal. They were proof of concept. These weren't hackers anymore. They had evolved into something new, elite and ruthless hackers that could bring down any corporation, anywhere, anytime. But with this much destruction, they were catching the attention of law enforcement and the FBI. They had a 5-star wanted level. After all the sophisticated attacks, the advanced technical infrastructure, and the millions in stolen cryptocurrency, you might be wondering who could pull off something this complex. Well, the FBI finally identified the core members in late 2024, and what they found shocked even me. Unlike the other state-backed hackers we cover on the channel, these guys were kids. Let me introduce you to the team that brought Las Vegas to its knees. Ahmed Hassam Eldon El-Badawi, just 23, known online as AD from College Station, Texas. Noah Michael Urban, barely 20, who went by Sosa and Elijah, operating out of Palm Coast, Florida. Evans Onyeka Osibo, also 20, from Dallas. Joel Martin Evans, 25, known as Jolie O. Leah, from Jacksonville, North Carolina. And Tyler Robert Buchanan, 22, working from across the Atlantic in the United Kingdom. Think about that for a second. When they started their campaign in June 2022, some of these guys weren't even old enough to drink, but they were sophisticated enough to bypass top 500 company security systems and orchestrate multi-million-dollar crypto heists. They got hit with conspiracy wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. The FBI proved these guys had specific intent and coordination across multiple jurisdictions, including international boundaries. When you're dealing with attacks that use residential proxies, AI voice synthesis, and cryptocurrency tumblers, proving who's behind the keyboard becomes incredibly challenging. Every attack could have been launched from anywhere in the world through layers of digital obscurity. These guys, due to their age, slipped up with their operational security, which ultimately led to their downfall. These 5 individuals represent just the tip of the iceberg. Remember, the FBI identified at least 12 members of this group, and for every member they've identified, there are likely others still operating in the shadows. Scattered Spider isn't going anywhere just yet. They've shown that age and resources aren't barriers to entry anymore. All you need is technical knowledge, determination, and a disregard for consequences. Everything another young, easily influenced wannabe hacker might have. Trust me, groups like Scattered Spider are only going to get more common. Scattered Spider is just the tip of the iceberg. The barriers to entry for cybercrime are lower than they've ever been. The thing is, you don't even need to be a technical genius anymore. You don't even need to understand how the attacks work. Want to SIM swap someone? There are services for that. Want to SWAT someone's house? There are people who'll do it for crypto. Need someone physically intimidated? There's literally violence as a service available on the dark web. Now, I'm not promoting this at all. I'm spreading awareness on the fact that the young modern-day hackers are evolving. And that brings me to a question for you. If a loose network of young hackers can bring Vegas to its knees, shut down casinos, and steal millions, what do you think happens when these techniques fall into the hands of government-backed hacking groups with unlimited resources and the most elite hackers in the state? I'll let you think about that one. Or stick around for the next story and find out. In the world of cybercrime, North Korea, a country often shrouded in mystery, has turned its gaze to the internet. Why, you might ask? Well, it's free money for them. Imagine a group of highly skilled hackers, their fingers dancing across keyboards in dimly lit rooms. These aren't your average cybercriminals. They're state-sponsored actors backed by the full might of Kim Jong-un. Their target? Cryptocurrency. Imagine if you could rob a bank without ever setting foot inside, or steal millions without leaving a trace. That's the allure of cryptocurrency theft. It's digital gold, ripe for the taking if you have the right tools and know-how. Enter our cast of characters. The Lazarus Group, Citrine Sleet, and Diamond Sleet. These aren't comic book villains, but real-world hacking groups, each with their own specialties and tactics. The Lazarus Group, like a digital octopus, has its tentacles in every crevice. They're the old hands, the ones who've been around the block a few times. Then there's Citrine Sleet, also known by a handful of other names. Dev 0139, Applejuice, Labyrinth, Chalama, UNC 4736. Their main targets? Banks and cryptocurrency organizations. But how do they do it? Well, Citrine Sleet is particularly fond of what we call social engineering. Imagine a con artist, but instead of face-to-face tricks, they use fake websites and job offers. They lure in unsuspecting victims with promises that are too good to be true. Lastly, we have Diamond Sleet. Now, here's where things get interesting. Diamond Sleet and Citrine Sleet share a special tool called the FUD Module Rootkit. Think of it as a skeleton key that can unlock almost any digital door. The fact that they're sharing this tool suggests they might be working together, pooling their resources to become an unstoppable threat. As we delve deeper into this story, we'll uncover the intricate web these groups have woven, their evolving tactics, and the global efforts to stop them. But remember, in the world of cybercrime, things are rarely as simple as they seem. Every line of code could be a trap, every email a potential Trojan horse. This is Hacker Gallery, and I'm about to show you a world where the stakes are high, and the enemy is always just one click away. On a cold February morning in 2021, as most of the world was still grappling with the pandemic, a different kind of threat was brewing in the digital realm. The FBI, CISA, and US Treasury weren't battling a virus, but they were fighting something just as insidious, a piece of malware called Applejuice. Now, you might be wondering, what's malware? Think of it as a nasty little program, like a digital germ designed to infect your computer and cause harm. But this wasn't just any malware. This was state-sponsored malware, meaning it was created and used by a country. In this case, North Korea. Imagine if a country, instead of sending spies, sent computer viruses to steal from other nations. That's essentially what was happening here. North Korea wasn't after state secrets this time, though. They were after something that's become just as valuable in our modern world. Cryptocurrency. For those who might not know, cryptocurrency is like digital money. It's not physical coins or bills you can hold, but it's just as real and can be worth a lot. And North Korea had found a clever way to steal it. The FBI, CISA, and US Treasury released a warning about this threat. They said, North Korean-backed state hackers are using malicious and fake crypto trading applications to steal cryptocurrency from individuals and companies worldwide. It was happening right under people's noses. The malware they were using, Applejuice, was created by the North Korean hackers, Lazarus Group. Now, Lazarus isn't a bunch of guys in a basement. It's referred to as North Korea's sole profitable enterprise. They are a highly sophisticated hacking group, and they also go by the name Hidden Cobra. They're like the Navy SEALs of the hacking world. Applejuice was sneaky. It disguised itself as a legitimate cryptocurrency trading app. People would download it, thinking they were getting a tool to help them make money. Instead, they were opening the floodgates. Once installed, Applejuice would quietly steal the user's cryptocurrency and send it back to North Korea. This wasn't just a one-off attack. It was a campaign, a coordinated effort to steal as much as possible from as many people as possible. And it was working. People and companies around the world were falling victim to this digital trap. The release of this advisory was like a flare gun being fired, warning the world of the danger lurking in the shadows of the internet. But as we'll see, this was just the beginning of a much larger, more complex cyber offensive that would unfold over the next few years. As the leaves turned golden and fell from the trees in the autumn of 2021, a different kind of fall was being orchestrated. The Lazarus Group, our North Korean hackers, had set their sights on new targets, an aerospace expert in the Netherlands, and a political journalist in Belgium. Now, you might wonder, what do these two very different professionals have in common? The answer lies in the information they possess. valuable data that could be exploited for financial gain or political advantage. The method our cyber criminals chose was something called spear phishing. Imagine regular fishing as casting a wide net into the sea, hoping to catch any fish that swims by. Spear phishing, on the other hand, is like using a harpoon to target a specific prized fish. In this case, the Lazarus Group crafted personalized, seemingly legitimate emails for each of their targets. These weren't just generic spam emails straight from Nigeria claiming they won $1 million. No, these were carefully researched and tailored messages designed to look like they came from trusted sources. For instance, our aerospace expert might have received an email that appeared to be from a prestigious aviation conference, inviting him to present his latest research. The political journalist, on the other hand, might have gotten a message that looked like it was from a reliable source or whistleblower. But the crown jewel of their deception was a fake job offer, supposedly from Amazon. Imagine the excitement of receiving an email from one of the world's largest companies, expressing interest in your skills and expertise. It would be tempting to click on that attachment or follow that link, wouldn't it? This is where social engineering comes into play. It's not about hacking computers. It's about hacking people. The attackers study their targets, learn about their interests, their ambitions, their fears. Then they craft messages that play on these emotions, making their targets more likely to let their guard down. In our story, the Lazarus Group had done their homework. They knew that an attractive job offer or an exclusive opportunity would be hard for their targets to resist, and all it would take was one click on a malicious link or one download of an infected attachment for the hackers to gain a foothold in their victims' systems. The trap was set. All that remained was for them to take the bait. In the quiet of their offices, both the aerospace expert and the political journalist hovered their cursors over the seemingly innocent emails, unaware that their next click just opened the door to Lazarus. The attackers deployed several malicious tools on their system, including droppers, loaders, fully featured web backdoors, and web uploaders. They got owned. As the new year dawned in 2022, a chill wind blew through the cybersecurity world. On January 4th, researchers stumbled upon the first signs of a zero-day vulnerability in Google Chrome being actively exploited. What's a zero-day vulnerability, you might ask? Imagine you're living in a house and you've always thought it was secure, but one day, you discover a secret door that you never knew existed. Worse yet, you realize burglars have already been using this door to sneak in and out. That's essentially what a zero-day vulnerability is. A security flaw that even the software makers don't know about, but the bad guys have already found and are exploiting. In this case, the house was Google Chrome, one of the most widely used web browsers in the world. The secret door, a flaw in the browser's code, officially labeled CVE 2022-0609. But unlike a physical break-in, where you might notice missing items, these hackers could come and go without leaving obvious traces. The significance of this discovery can't be overstated. This vulnerability in Chrome meant that millions of users worldwide were potentially exposed to attacks without their knowledge. Chrome isn't just any browser. It's used by individuals, businesses, and even governments worldwide. A vulnerability in Chrome is like a crack in the foundation of the digital world we've built. It could potentially be exploited to hijack browser sessions, steal sensitive information, spread malware, or even take complete control of users' computers. What made this particular zero-day even more alarming was who was behind it. The researchers didn't just find a vulnerability. They found evidence that it was these North Korean hackers that were actively exploiting it. They caught them right in the flesh of it. This discovery highlights a harsh reality. No software is ever truly 100% secure. Even the most widely used and regularly updated programs can have hidden flaws. The race was on to patch this vulnerability before it could be exploited further. But in the world of cybersecurity, closing one door often just means the attackers start looking for another. The discovery of this zero-day was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new chapter. As summer bloomed in June 2022, our digital villains weren't taking a vacation. Instead, they were cooking up a new scheme, one that would make their previous attacks look like child's play. Imagine you're building a house. You trust that the bricks, wood, and nails you buy are safe and sturdy. But what if someone had tampered with those materials before they even reached you? That's essentially what a supply chain attack is. It's about compromising the building blocks of software before they even reach the end user. Our North Korean hackers, ever creative, crafted a malicious application they called Crypto Dashboard V2. It sounded innocent enough, right? Just another tool for managing cryptocurrency. But hidden within this seemingly helpful app was a nasty surprise. The hackers used a trick called DLL sideloading. Now, don't let the technical terms scare you. Think of DLLs as helper files that programs use to run properly. Normally, when a program needs a DLL, it looks in specific places to find it. But with DLL sideloading, the attackers place a malicious DLL where the program will find it first. It's like replacing a trusted friend with an imposter who looks just like them. In this case, they used an MSI package, think of it as a suitcase for software, to deliver their malicious payload. Inside this suitcase was a file called duser.dll, which looked harmless but was actually the bad guy in disguise. But our hackers weren't done yet. Fast forward to March 2023, and they pulled off an even bigger heist. This time, their target was 3CX, a company that makes video conferencing software used by businesses worldwide. The attackers, now known as UNC4736, managed to sneak their malicious code into 3CX's software. It's like they poisoned the well that thousands of companies drink from. When businesses downloaded what they thought was legitimate 3CX software, they were actually inviting the hackers into their systems. This wasn't just a one-off attack, it was part of a larger pattern. Before hitting 3CX, these same hackers had targeted a company called Trading Technologies, which makes software for stock trading. They had turned X-Trader, a trusted tool, into a Trojan horse. The consequences of these supply chain attacks are far-reaching. It's not just about one company getting hacked. It's about compromising the trust we place in the software we use every day. When you can't trust the tools you rely on, well, it changes everything. As autumn leaves began to fall in September 2022, cybersecurity researchers at ESET made a chilling discovery. The North Korean hackers had developed a new tool, one that would prove to be their most dangerous yet. They called it the FUD module rootkit. Now, you might be wondering, what's a rootkit? Imagine a master key that can unlock every door in a building, but it's invisible to the security guards. That's what a rootkit does to a computer. It's a type of malware that hides deep within a system, giving hackers complete control while remaining undetected. But the FUD module wasn't just any rootkit. It used a clever trick called BYOVD, or Bring Your Own Vulnerable Driver. To understand this, think of a computer like a secure building. The security guards, the antivirus software, are trained to spot and stop known criminals, the malware. But what if a criminal could convince a trusted delivery person, a legitimate driver, to unknowingly bring them inside? That's exactly what the FUD module did. It exploited a vulnerability in a Dell hardware driver, a piece of software that helps your computer talk to Dell hardware. The hackers found a way to use this trusted driver to sneak their malicious code past all the computer's defenses. What made this attack particularly alarming was that it was the first time anyone had seen this technique used with this specific Dell driver. The cybersecurity world was caught off guard. Any computer using this Dell driver, and there were millions of them, could potentially be at risk. It wasn't just about stealing data anymore. With this level of access, the hackers could potentially take complete control of a system, all while remaining invisible to standard security measures. Cybersecurity experts around the world scrambled to understand the full capabilities of the FUD module. How many systems had already been compromised? What other trusted drivers might be vulnerable to similar attacks? The discovery of the FUD module marked a new chapter in the ongoing cyber war with North Korea. It showed that the North Korean hackers were not just persistent, but innovative. They were finding new ways to bypass even the most sophisticated defenses, turning trusted components of our computer systems against us. As September drew to a close, the cybersecurity community braced itself. If this was what the hackers were capable of now, what might they come up with next? On October 19th, a group known as Dev0139, also called Citrine Sleet, launched a clever attack. They weren't using complex computer code this time. No, their weapon of choice was much simpler and perhaps more dangerous: human trust. Imagine you're at work, and suddenly you're invited to join a new group chat. The name looks official. It has your company's name, appended with OKXV adjustment. It seems like it's about important business matters. You see your colleagues are there too. Why wouldn't you join? This is exactly what happened to 3 employees of a cryptocurrency investment company. The hackers had created a fake Telegram group, posing as representatives of OKX, a well-known cryptocurrency exchange platform. But the trap wasn't fully set yet. Once they had gained the trust of their targets, the hackers made their next move. They sent an Excel file with an innocent-looking name: OKX Binance and Huobi VIP fee comparison. To the unsuspecting eye, it looked like a simple comparison of fees between different crypto exchanges. Who wouldn't want to take a look at that? But this Excel file was far from harmless. It was what we call a weaponized file, loaded with malicious macros. Now, macros are usually helpful little programs inside Excel that automate tasks, but in this case, they were more like tiny Trojan horses, ready to unleash their payload once the file was opened. They used the art of social engineering to use a human's natural tendencies to trust and to be helpful against them. They created scenarios that seem so normal, so everyday, that we let our guard down. In the world of cryptocurrency, where large sums of money flow through the blockchain, this kind of attack can be devastating. A single click on a malicious file could potentially give hackers access to millions of dollars worth of digital currency. Cybersecurity awareness in the financial sector should be one of the most important considerations. It's not enough to have strong passwords or good antivirus software. People need to be trained to spot these kinds of tricks, to question unexpected messages or files, even when they seem to come from trusted sources. 2 years later, in the summer heat of August 2024, after these North Korean hackers stole hundreds of millions of dollars of cryptocurrency, a different kind of heat was building up. Cybersecurity experts were about to uncover a chilling new development in the ongoing crisis of North Korean crypto heists. The group known as Citrine Sleet, those digital masterminds we've come to know, had been busy. They'd found a new way to break into people's computers, and it was clever. You see, similarly to the Google Chrome 0-day that Lazarus Group was exploiting in the past, Citrine Sleet discovered another. But Citrine Sleet didn't just find this secret door. They built an entire obstacle course around it. We call this an exploit chain. It's like a series of dominoes, each one triggering the next, until finally they're inside your computer. The first domino in this chain, a seemingly innocent website. It looked harmless enough, but visiting it was like stepping onto a trapdoor. This is what we call a drive-by download. You don't need to click anything or download a file. Just by visiting the website, invisible to you, malicious code starts running on your computer. It's like walking past a pickpocket who can empty your pockets without you feeling it. What made this attack particularly nasty was its use of the Chrome 0-day vulnerability. Citrine Sleet was ahead of the game. They'd found a way into millions of computers around the world. North Korea had did it again, and for a while, no one even knew they were there. On August 19th, 2024, a day that would go down in history, Microsoft uncovered a chilling truth. The North Korean hackers had unleashed their most sophisticated attack yet. Imagine a fortress with multiple layers of defense. The hackers had found a way to breach every single layer, one by one. This wasn't just a simple break-in. It was a carefully orchestrated heist that would make Ocean's 11 look like a walk in the park. The first domino to fall was the 0-day vulnerability in Chrome, CVE 2024-7971. The hackers used this to gain what's called remote code execution. Basically, they could now run whatever commands they wanted on the victim's computer, as if they were sitting right there at the keyboard. But they didn't stop there. Once inside, they set their sights on the very heart of the computer's defenses, the kernel. Think of the kernel as the control room of a nuclear power plant. If you can get in there, you can do just about anything. The hackers used another trick, called privilege escalation, to gain the highest level of access possible. So, after exploiting the Chrome 0-day, they then exploited even more 0-day vulnerabilities in Windows. CVE 2024-38193, and CVE 2024-38106. With this godlike power over the system, they deployed their secret weapon, the FUD module rootkit. What made this attack particularly frightening was the level of collaboration between different North Korean hacking groups. It wasn't just one team pulling this off. It was like watching a symphony orchestra with different sections working in perfect harmony. The FUD module rootkit, a tool shared between the groups known as Citrine Sleet and Diamond Sleet, played a crucial role. Not only this, but their execution of multiple zero-day vulnerabilities. 0 days are usually hard to come across, but not to these elite hackers. This was no ordinary hack. It was a demonstration of power, and North Korea was flexing on everyone. On August 21st, just 2 days after the attack was discovered, Google released a fix for the vulnerability in Chrome. Users should ensure they are using the latest version of Chromium, they said. It was a simple statement, but behind it lay countless hours of frantic work by engineers and programmers. This is what we call patch management, making sure everyone can stay safe and install these crucial updates. Microsoft wasn't far behind. They too were working around the clock to patch up the holes in their systems. It was like watching a crew frantically patch up a sinking ship, knowing that if they failed, the whole vessel might go under. On August 30th, Microsoft made a bold statement. We assess with high confidence, they said, that the observed exploitation of CVE 2024-7971 can be attributed to a North Korean threat actor targeting the cryptocurrency sector for financial gain. They pointed the finger at a group called Citrine Sleet, or as Microsoft calls them, Dev0139. So how did they know this? Well, they look at the fingerprints left behind in the code, the tactics used, the targets chosen. It's not an exact science, but over time, different hacking groups developed their own styles, their own signatures. As August drew to a close, the immediate crisis had been contained, but a sense of unease lingered in the air. The events of August 2024 had shown the extent these guys could go to. As people around the world updated their browsers and checked their systems, one thing became clear. In this new reality, cybersecurity wasn't just for the experts anymore. It was everyone's responsibility. Let's take a moment to reflect on the journey we've taken through the shadowy world of North Korean cyber operations. Over the years, we've witnessed an alarming evolution in North Korea's hacking capabilities. What started as simple tricks has grown into a sophisticated, multi-layered attack strategy. Their attacks are like a well-choreographed dance, each step precisely planned. It starts with a seemingly innocent email. That's the phishing part. Then, they exploit a flaw in your web browser that even the makers don't know about yet. A zero-day exploit. Once inside, they climb the ladder of your computer's defenses, exploiting more zero-day vulnerabilities and gaining more and more control. Finally, they plant their custom rootkit, which lets them come and go as they please. But what makes these attacks truly frightening is the target, our global financial system, especially the world of cryptocurrency. The North Korean hackers have shown they know this world inside and out. They speak the language, understand the technology, and exploit the trust that makes these systems work. The threat is ongoing and evolving. Every time cybersecurity experts plug one hole, these state-sponsored attackers find another. Remember that in the world of cybersecurity, there are no happy endings, only ongoing vigilance. The North Korean hackers and others like them are still out there, looking for their next big score. The battle is far from over. In fact, it's only just begun. Leave a comment below on what you might do differently, now knowing that North Korean hackers are hunting day and night for your precious cryptocurrency. In November 2023, cybersecurity analysts in the Czech Republic noticed something disturbing. Banking apps were appearing on people's phones. Apps that looked legitimate but weren't coming from official sources. I've seen a lot of banking trojans in my time, but this was different. This was way too advanced for some low-level attack. These weren't your typical malicious apps. They were using something called Progressive Web Apps, or PWAs. Now, PWAs are actually a legitimate technology that lets websites function like native apps on your phone. You've probably used them before. Think of when a website asks if you want to add to home screen. That's a PWA. But here's where it gets interesting. The attackers were distributing these fake banking apps through domains that you can see here. To the average user, these looked like legitimate banking websites. They even had a proper developer certificate with a unique SHA-1 fingerprint. That's the kind of detail that makes security professionals take a second look. As I said, at first glance, it seems pretty legit. The initial attack vector was beautifully simple. SMS messages about tax returns. But don't let that simplicity fool you. What started as basic SMS phishing would evolve into one of the most sophisticated banking fraud campaigns I've seen in recent years. Before we continue with the story, I need you to understand something crucial here. PWAs aren't inherently malicious. They're a powerful technology that makes the web more accessible. But like any tool, they can be weaponized. What made this attack particularly effective was how it exploited the trust people have in their banking apps. When you see a banking app on your phone, your natural instinct is to trust it, especially if it looks identical to the real thing. The package name they used looked like a legitimate system component, shown here. These attackers understood both the technical architecture of PWAs and the psychology of their victims. And boy, were they just getting started. The attack began with a simple text message. Your tax return is ready for processing, it read, followed by a link. In the Czech Republic, where this campaign first emerged, thousands of these messages were hitting phones simultaneously. But this wasn't your typical phishing campaign. Let me take you behind the scenes of what made this attack different. The attackers had set up an impressive infrastructure of domains, all carefully crafted to look legitimate. Their base of operations? A sophisticated worker-based URL. Listen, man, workers.dev is wild. It's basically the service from Cloudflare where developers can run these small programs called workers, right? Like legitimate developers use it to test their apps and build small projects, which is super cool. But hackers have figured out how to use this for some seriously sketchy stuff. It's because you get this free hosting, SSL certificates, to make the website seem secure. And you're running on one of the most trusted networks in the world, Cloudflare. Each victim got their own unique identifier in the URL, a personal touch that helped bypass security systems. Remember those PWAs I mentioned earlier? Well, the attackers took it a step further with web APKs. Think of web APKs as PWAs on steroids. They're web apps that get converted into actual Android application packages. This means they can request permissions just like real apps, access device features, and appear completely native to your phone. It's a legitimate technology that Google developed to make web apps more powerful, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a dangerous weapon. The attackers set up multiple subdomains under this main domain. Each one targeted a different bank. They used this one for Raiffeisen Bank, this domain for CSOB, a universal bank in the Czech Republic, and many others. These weren't random names. They were carefully structured to fly under the radar of security systems while looking legitimate enough to fool users. What made this infrastructure particularly clever was its modularity. The attackers could swap out domains instantly if one got detected. They had domains on standby, waiting in case one got blocked or taken down. Listen, I've analyzed hundreds of phishing campaigns, but this level of technical sophistication is rare. The transition from simple PWAs to web APKs wasn't just an upgrade. It was a complete paradigm shift in how banking malware operates. These weren't just fake websites. They were fully functional, malicious applications that could request permissions, access NFC capabilities, and interact with your device at a system level. The infrastructure they built wasn't just for stealing credentials. It was the foundation for something much more sinister. Something that would soon evolve into one of the most sophisticated banking Trojans we've seen in recent years. This really was just the beginning of their reign. Just when victims thought they were simply checking their tax returns, the attack took an unexpected turn. Imagine you got that text, and you've just entered your credentials into what you think is your banking app, and suddenly your phone rings. The caller ID shows your bank's number, and the person on the other end knows your name, your account details, and sounds completely professional. Here's what was really happening behind the scenes. The malicious app was using something called a web view. Think of it as a mini web browser built into the app. But this wasn't just displaying web pages. It was actively harvesting every piece of information you entered. Through a JavaScript interface, the attackers had complete control over Android functions on the victim's device. They could see everything in real time. The timing was crucial. The moment credentials were entered, they appeared on the attacker's screen. And that's when they made their move. The phone call. But this wasn't just any social engineering call. The attackers had everything they needed to sound legitimate. Your name, your account details, even your recent transactions. I'm calling from your bank's security department. We've detected suspicious activity on your account, they'd say. And they could prove it, because they were the ones who had just accessed your account. This is next-level psychological manipulation. When someone can tell you exactly what's happening in your account while you're looking at it, your guard comes down completely. The real genius? They wouldn't just try to steal your money directly. Instead, they'd convince you to install what they called a protective app. Ngate. It's a security measure, they'd say. We're rolling this out to all our customers to prevent fraud. And this was just step one of their plan. What came next was even crazier. Most malware operations you'll encounter use a traditional command and control server. Basically a central hub sending instructions to infected devices. But Ngate? These guys took a completely different approach. Think about why this matters. Traditional malware infrastructure often gets detected because security teams know exactly what to look for. Command and control traffic has certain patterns. By controlling devices through their phishing site, these attackers effectively mask their malicious traffic as regular web browsing. It's a bit like hiding in plain sight. Instead of building a conventional malware infrastructure, the attackers implemented a two-server architecture that was anything but ordinary. The first server hosted their phishing website. The second server in their architecture handled the NFC gate relay operations, the component responsible for capturing and transmitting payment card data. For context, NFC stands for Near Field Communication. It is a wireless technology that allows devices to communicate when they're close to each other, typically just a few centimeters apart. You use it every day without thinking about it, tapping your credit card to pay, using your phone for Apple Pay, scanning into work with a key card, or even some public transit passes. However, like any technology, it can be exploited by hackers through what's often called NFC gate. Hackers can perform relay attacks, which is essentially extending the NFC range beyond normal limits. They can clone legitimate cards or even eavesdrop on communications to steal sensitive data. Think of someone copying your work badge, intercepting your credit card info while you pay, or cloning your work access key. All of this technical sophistication, all of these moving parts, they were building to something big. The real genius of Ngate wasn't just in its ability to steal data. It was in how that data could be turned into cold, hard cash. The attackers had perfected a method of using stolen NFC data at ATMs across Prague. Think about that for a second. They weren't just stealing your credentials. They were walking up to ATMs and withdrawing physical cash using data captured through their relay system. The virtual world had crossed over into reality. Czech police had been tracking these withdrawals, and they finally got their break. In a significant operation in Prague, they arrested their primary suspect. And this is what blows my mind. The guy was just 22 years old. When they caught him, he was carrying 160,000 Czech korunas. That's over 6,000 euros, or about $6,500 in cash. A kid barely old enough to drink in the United States had orchestrated one of the most sophisticated banking Trojans we've seen, combining cutting-edge NFC relay attacks with social engineering. It's a reminder that in cybercrime, technical sophistication doesn't always correlate with age or experience. So now, you might have thought that was the end, some silly 22-year-old being arrested. But unfortunately, this was only the beginning. The cybercriminal underground has yet again done something you weren't expecting. They have taken the core concepts of Ngate and transformed them into a global threat called Ghost Tap. God, I love my job. Okay, anyway, Ghost Tap is a little bit different. Instead of targeting ATMs, these attackers are going after something much bigger: mobile payment systems like Apple Pay and Google Pay. They've built a distributed network of money mules across the globe, each equipped with specialized NFC-capable devices running custom software. The technical requirements are as follows. Each theft operation will need 2 devices running NFC gate, one to capture the NFC traffic and another to replay it. They've even figured out how to keep NFC functioning, even in airplane mode, making it nearly impossible for me to track their activities. Their system can clone unique identifiers, capture traffic for later analysis, and even export detailed technical data for further exploitation. The worst part about this story, and I hate to break it to you, but this NFC gate they're running is actually a legitimate tool. NFC gate was originally developed as a security research tool, compatible with Android 4.4 and up, capable of capturing and analyzing NFC traffic. The criminals have taken this foundation and turned it into a global fraud operation. What started with a 22-year-old making ATM withdrawals in Prague has transformed into a global operation targeting the very foundation of mobile payment systems. And that's what makes ghost taps so dangerous. It's yet another horrific act of financial fraud.
But here's what fascinates me about these NFC relay attacks.
They're not invincible. In fact, they have a crucial weakness that's almost poetic in its simplicity: time itself. You see, when a legitimate NFC transaction occurs, it happens at the speed of light. But when attackers try to relay that signal through their servers, that creates a delay. It might be milliseconds, but in internet systems, that's an eternity. Modern payment terminals can detect these delays through what we call distance-bounding protocols. Think of it as a stopwatch that knows exactly how long a transaction should take. While banks and payment processors are implementing these technical controls, like transaction timing analysis and location verification, you're not powerless in this fight. The most effective protection. It's a combination of institutional security measures and your own awareness. Banks are now using sophisticated device fingerprinting and multi-factor authentication. But here's what you need to do on your end. Only download apps from official sources. No exceptions. Keep your NFC disabled when you're not using it. For physical cards, consider using protective RFID cases. And pro tip, digital wallet versions of your cards, protected by biometric authentication, are significantly harder to compromise than physical cards. Yeah, that's right. Adding your card to your Apple Wallet is arguably safer than walking around with your bank card unprotected in your pocket. The ghost tap threat remains active, evolving as we speak. The criminals behind these schemes rely on both technical sophistication and human error. Remove either element, and their attack falls apart. If this ever happened to you, let me know in the comments where this happened. It might just have been this very syndicate-running ghost tap. It's October 2016, and the internet is about to face one of its biggest threats yet. But this isn't some high-tech supercomputer or a team of elite hackers we're talking about. No, this is something much worse. And it was everywhere. You see, back then, we were all getting excited about these new smart devices. You know, internet-connected gadgets like security cameras, routers, even those fancy air quality monitors. We thought we were living in the future, right? But here's the catch.
A lot of these devices had about as much security as a screen door on a submarine.
Enter Mirai, a piece of malware that would change the game. Now, for those of you who aren't tech-savvy, malware is basically just bad software designed to mess things up. And boy, did Mirai mess things up. This thing spread like wildfire, infecting over 500,000 of these Internet of Things, IoT devices. We're talking about your neighbor's security camera, your buddy's router, maybe even that air quality monitor in your kid's room. All these innocent-looking gadgets turned into soldiers in a massive cyber army. But what does a cyber army do, you ask? Well, in this case, they launched what's called a DDoS attack. Imagine you're trying to get into a store, but suddenly, thousands of people show up and crowd the entrance. You can't get in, right?
That's basically what a DDoS attack does to websites and online services. And this wasn't just any DDoS attack. This was the mother of all DDoS attacks.
Mirai generated over 1 terabit per second of traffic. To put that in perspective, it's like trying to stick your hand in a can of Pringles. The internet just couldn't handle it. The target? A company called Dyn, which provided DNS services. Think of DNS like the internet's phone book. It helps your computer find the right websites. By attacking Dyn, Mirai disrupted internet services for millions of people worldwide. Suddenly, people couldn't access popular websites, stream videos, or even check their email in some cases. This, my friends, was the first major problem. It showed us just how vulnerable our hyper-connected world had become. All those convenient smart devices we'd been adding to our homes, they'd just become weapons in the hands of cybercriminals. But this was only the beginning. The Mirai attack was like the first domino to fall in a long, complex chain of events. Trust me, it only gets crazier from here. So, we've got this Mirai botnet, right? It's already caused havoc, taking down big chunks of the internet. But in 2017, just a year after that massive attack, something happened that would change the game entirely. The source code for Mirai got leaked. Now, think of source code like a recipe. It's the step-by-step instructions that tell a computer program how to work. And suddenly, this recipe for destruction was out there for anyone to see and use. It's like if Colonel Sanders' secret recipe suddenly appeared on the internet. Now everyone could make that finger-licking good chicken, right? Well, in this case, it wasn't chicken. It was pure carnage. This leak had some serious consequences. Cybercriminals, the bad guys of the internet world, now had access to this powerful tool. Not good, right? But it gets worse. See, these cybercriminals didn't just copy Mirai. They started tweaking it, changing bits here and there, creating new versions. We call these variants in cybersecurity. It's like they took that original recipe and started adding their own secret ingredients. So now, instead of just one Mirai, we've got a whole family of them, each one a little different, a little harder to detect, a little more dangerous. The Mirai source code leak opened up a Pandora's box of cyber threats. It gave cybercriminals a powerful new tool and kicked off a new era of botnet attacks. But hold on to your hats, because this roller coaster ride is far from over. The Mirai family was about to evolve in ways that would make the original look like child's play. Fast forward to 2020. The world's in chaos with this new pandemic, and guess what? The cybercriminals decide to join the party. So, these researchers at Avira, they're like the watchdogs of the internet, right? They've got this thing called a honeypot.
It's like a trap for malware, lets them catch and study these nasty programs. And what do they find? A new version of our old friend Mirai. But this time, it's got a twist that'll make your head spin. This new variant, they're calling it Mirai Corona. Yeah, you heard that right.
These hackers, they're opportunistic as hell. They're using the fear and confusion around COVID-19 to spread their malware. Now, let me break this down for you. This new Mirai, it's using the word Corona in its commands. It's like a sick joke, right? But it's more than just a name. This thing is targeting what they call NAS devices. That's network attached storage. Basically, it's where a lot of businesses keep their important files. This variant is exploiting a specific vulnerability in these Zycel NAS devices. They found a secret backdoor that the manufacturers left open by mistake, and they're using it to break in and take control. This Mirai Corona, it's not just smarter, it's tougher too. It has anti-DDoS capabilities. You know, the way to attack websites by overwhelming them with traffic. But this malware has defenses against that kind of attack. It's like it was wearing armor. And if that wasn't enough, it's using this custom encryption technique. Encryption, that's like a secret code. It makes it harder for the network defenders to figure out what the malware's doing. It's like the malware is speaking in a language that only it understands. Now here's where it gets really technical. This thing is using something called control flow obfuscation. It's like, imagine you're trying to follow a recipe, but someone's jumbled up all the steps. That's what this does to the code. Makes it super hard for security researchers to figure out what's going on. And finally, it's got this special function for parsing attacks. It's like the brain of the operation, figuring out how to launch its DDoS attacks. While the world is dealing with a real virus, these cyber criminals are unleashing a cyber one. They're targeting critical infrastructure at a time when we're all relying on technology more than ever. It's like kicking someone when they're down, and it shows just how far these hackers will go. The scary part? They were just ramping up. The Mirai family is proving that it can adapt to anything, even a global pandemic. It's like watching a villain in a movie get more dangerous with each sequel, and you're only halfway through the plot.
Okay, let's get into some seriously wild stuff. We're now in the current year of 2024, and just when you thought things couldn't get any crazier, we've got a wild vulnerability enter the mix. Enter CVE 2024-7029, a nasty little surprise discovered by this cybersecurity researcher named Aline Eliovich. This vulnerability, it's like finding a hidden door in a house that you thought was secure. But this door isn't in your computer or your phone. It's in your security cameras. You heard that right. Those AV-Tech CCTV cameras that are supposed to keep you safe, they have a huge weakness. So, what's the deal with this vulnerability? It's all about the brightness function. You know how you can adjust brightness on your camera? Well, turns out hackers can use that same function to inject their own commands into the camera. It's like they're hijacking the remote control, but instead of changing channels, they're taking over the whole damn system. This type of attack, it's called a command injection vulnerability. What it really means is that the program isn't checking what you're inputting. It's just taking whatever you give it and running with it. It's like if you had a bouncer at a club who just let anyone in without checking IDs. That's command injection, bro. It's like if you could whisper to Siri, "Hey, instead of setting an alarm, why don't you just give me access to the entire iPhone operating system?" And boom, suddenly you're in control of everything. That's kind of what's happening here. This vulnerability has been around since at least 2019. Yeah, for 5 years, this potential backdoor was just sitting there, waiting to be exploited. And get this, it affects all AV-Tech AVM1203 cameras up to a specific firmware version. That's a lot of cameras. This vulnerability, it allows for something called remote code execution. In simple terms, it means hackers can run whatever code they want on these cameras from anywhere in the world. It's like they're sitting right there in your living room, messing with your stuff. But they could be on the other side of the planet. Now you might be thinking, okay, but surely someone caught this earlier, right? Well, that's where things get even weirder. See, in the cybersecurity world, when they find a vulnerability like this, they assign it a CVE number. It's like a wanted poster for computer bugs. But this one, it didn't get its official CVE assignment until August 2024, even though people knew about it way back in 2019. This delay, it's a big deal. It means for years, this vulnerability was out there, known to some, but not officially recognized. So what does all this mean? We've got potentially millions of cameras out there, all with this hidden weakness. And now that it's officially recognized, it's like ringing the dinner bell for hackers all over the world. The potential for widespread exploitation here is off the charts. This specific brand of security cameras that are in homes, businesses, maybe even government buildings, all of them potentially vulnerable to being taken over by anyone who knows how to exploit this weakness. And remember, these cameras, they're your eyes when you're not around. They're supposed to be keeping watch, keeping you safe. But now, they might just be the very thing putting you at risk.
On March 18th, 2024, we were about to witness what cybersecurity experts are calling the perfect storm. So remember that Corona Mirai variant we talked about earlier? Well, it's back with a vengeance. And it's got a new trick up its sleeve. These hackers, they're not messing around anymore. They've started actively exploiting that CCTV camera vulnerability we discussed. Here's where it gets really messed up though. You see, those cameras, well, unfortunately they were end of life. Basically, they're old news. Supposedly outdated. The saddest part about all of this is that a ton of people are still using them. We're talking about cameras that should have been replaced 5 years ago. Still out there, still watching, and now they're prime targets. Cybersecurity researchers at Akamai, specifically their security incident response team, they catch wind of this attack, and what they see is straight out of a cyber horror movie. This Corona Mirai, it's not just infecting a few cameras here and there. We're talking massive, unprecedented scale. It's like a plague, spreading from camera to camera, turning them into zombie soldiers in this massive Botnet army. But how's it doing this? Well, it's pretty clever in a terrifying sort of way. First, it downloads and runs a JavaScript file. This was the instruction manual for the attack. This file then loads the main botnet payload, the code that turns these cameras into mindless drones. Once it's in, The infected camera connects to the command and control servers. These are like the headquarters for the bad guys, sending out orders to all these infected devices. It was using Telnet to connect to other devices. Telnet's like this old-school way of talking between computers. It's using ports 23, 23, 23, and 37 to 15. Why these specific ports? Well, Telnet operates by default on port 23 and sometimes 2323, but as for port 37-215, who knows? But it's working. Oh, and just to add insult to injury, every time it infects a new device, it prints out the word Corona on the console, leaving its signature behind like a stamp on their victim. This is such a big deal because we're not just talking about a few cameras being compromised. This has the potential for attacks on a scale we've never seen before. Imagine millions of these cameras, all turned against the internet at once. We could be looking at DDoS attacks that put the original Mirai botnet to shame. This was the moment where everything we've talked about, all the vulnerabilities, all the evolving malware, it all comes together in this perfect storm of chaos. And the scariest part? This isn't some Hollywood movie. This is happening right now, in the real world, affecting real devices and real people. The potential for damage here is off the charts. There is a real possibility that this botnet will take down huge chunks of the internet, disrupting businesses, maybe even interfering with government networks. All because of some outdated cameras that aren't going to get an important security update, because they're end of life. One little weakness, exploited at the right time, in the right way, and suddenly we're facing a cyber attack of gigantic proportions. Well, it's about time we take a breath and talk about some good news for a change. You might think these cyber criminals are untouchable, operating from the shadows. But here's the thing, they're not immune to the law. Let me quickly tell you about something that went down in June 2022. It's a story that'll give you a glimmer of hope. There was this botnet called RSOX. In this case, it was run by Russian cybercriminals. These guys had built this massive network of hacked devices. And get this, a lot of people had no clue their computers were part of it. These Russian guys were monetizing it. The cybercriminals weren't just using this botnet for their own attacks. No, they were renting it out. It's like they'd built this digital army and were letting anyone with enough cash use it to attack businesses, government agencies, you name it. It was a prime example of cybercrime as a service. It's like Uber, but for flooding networks. Now, they thought nobody could touch them, but they were wrong. In a move that sounds like something out of a spy movie, authorities from 4 different countries, the USA, Germany, the Netherlands, and the UK, they all teamed up. This wasn't just some local police operation. This was international law enforcement cooperation at its finest. They took RSOX down, dismantled it, pulled the plug on millions of infected devices. They rented out the botnet for themselves, analyzed the back-end network and tracked them down. But for every botnet taken down by law enforcement, there's another one popping up. It's a never-ending game of hide and seek. That's why there's this ongoing effort to secure IoT devices. You know, all those smart gadgets we've got in our homes. Because every unsecured device is a potential soldier in the next botnet army, and it's not just about law enforcement. It's about all of us being more aware, more careful about our online security. Manufacturers of these devices need to step up and build better security into their devices from the get-go. This is the world we're living in now. A world where your toaster could be part of an organized cyber criminal gang, and you wouldn't even know about it. On the flip side, it's also a world where international cooperation is necessary to constantly take down the most sophisticated cyber threats. So yeah, the fight against botnets is ongoing. It's complex, it's global, and it's not going to end anytime soon. But stories like Mirai and RSOX, they give us hope. They show us that even in the crazy world we live in, justice can still prevail. Imagine scrolling through Spotify and finding a podcast episode that's exactly 0 seconds long. Not 1 second, not half a second, absolutely 0. Sounds impossible, right? Well, that's exactly what caught my attention during a routine security scan in early 2023. I'm speaking to you from the Hacker Gallery, where we document the most innovative cyber attacks of our time. This story isn't necessarily about some super crazy malware or billion-dollar heists. It's about something far more subtle: deception and the art of abusing trust. Let me show you how deep this rabbit hole goes. These 0-second episodes weren't just random glitches. They were part of a carefully orchestrated campaign appearing simultaneously across Spotify, Amazon Music, and Audible. But here's where it gets interesting. While these episodes appeared to have zero length in the platform interface, they actually contained 10 to 20-second audio clips with synthesized speech, directing listeners to external links. Now, you might be wondering how attackers managed to pull this off. The key lies in understanding content distribution services like First Story. These services act as middlemen, allowing creators to publish content across multiple platforms simultaneously. By exploiting these legitimate services, attackers gained a foothold in some of the most trusted platforms in digital media. By manipulating metadata and exploiting platform trust, these attackers turned major streaming services into unwitting accomplices in their SEO poisoning campaign. Think of SEO poisoning as just using trusted platforms to boost the visibility of malicious content in search results. What you're about to witness is the evolution of platform abuse. From these deceptively simple 0-second episodes to increasingly sophisticated attacks across multiple platforms. This is just the beginning. A demonstration of how modern cybercriminals don't need to break systems when they can simply abuse them. When you see how this technique evolved to infiltrate dating apps and educational institutions, you'll understand why this seemingly simple hack needs to be talked about today. In the world of cybersecurity, sometimes the simplest tricks are the most effective. While platforms were busy defending against sophisticated bots and automated attacks, someone figured out how to bypass millions of dollars worth of security systems with nothing more than a pen and paper. The attack was brilliant in its simplicity. Pretend for a second that it's late at night. You're bored, you're in a certain mood, maybe feeling a bit devious, so you pull up a dating app. You come across a profile with 2 images. The first is exactly what you'd expect: an attractive person smiling at the camera. But it's the second image that you don't expect: a handwritten web address on a piece of paper. Dating apps, like most modern platforms, use advanced content moderation systems to detect and block malicious links. These systems are trained to recognize digital text, URLs, and common spam patterns. But here's the clever part: they're not great at reading handwriting. By simply writing out the web address by hand, these attackers found a way to completely bypass these detection systems. Security researchers found that nearly every suspicious profile followed this exact same pattern: attractive photo, followed by handwritten link. It was systematic, it was coordinated, and it was spreading across multiple dating platforms simultaneously. Now, for a lot of people watching, I know you'd be smart enough to instantly know there is something just not right about that. You think, how could anyone go to that website and fall for that? Well, in a weird irony, using dating apps to look for a potential partner is arguably the same as hackers looking for a potential target. Sometimes it's just a numbers game. As we'll see, this same principle of exploiting trust and human perception would soon be applied to targets far more significant than dating apps. What happens when attackers move from dating apps to targeting some of the most prestigious educational institutions in the world? That's exactly what we discovered when researchers found compromised wiki pages across Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, and other top universities. Let me explain why this attack was particularly clever. You see, MediaWiki and TWiki installations are like the backbone of many university documentation systems. They're trusted, they're widely used, and most importantly, they carry the authority of these institutions. When you see a link on a Stanford or MIT domain, you automatically trust it. That's exactly what these attackers were counting on. The attack chain was brilliantly engineered. First, they compromised these wiki installations, then populated them with pages offering everything from free gift cards to Fortnite currency. But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't just post obvious scams. They created sophisticated credential phishing forms that looked legitimate because they were hosted on actual university domains. The Europass ePortfolio service exploitation was particularly devastating. Think about it. A service designed to help students showcase their achievements became a vehicle for stealing their credentials. What makes this campaign truly frightening is its psychological aspect. Like I said, these weren't random scam pages. They were carefully crafted to appeal to specific audiences. Want Fortnite V-Bucks? Here's a page on a prestigious university's domain offering them. Looking for gift cards? Here's a survey hosted on an educational platform you trust. Just fill out all your information on this secure page. What's the risk? It might seem silly that these actually work, but all the hacker needs to do is get their fraudulent website in the face of the masses. If they can get their phishing pages in front of a large audience in a secure way that looks somewhat legit, then unfortunately there will be victims no matter what. Every compromised wiki page, every fake survey, every phishing form that victims fell for eroded the trust we place in educational institutions. And trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild. Just when security teams thought they had a handle on the wiki compromises, something even more concerning emerged. Researchers discovered that attackers had found a way to exploit FCK Editor, a text editing system discontinued way back in 2010. But here's the thing, this outdated system was still running on thousands of institutional websites. Let me show you exactly how this worked. You know how when you click a link, it sometimes passes through a redirect page? Well, these attackers found that many institutional websites had what we call an open redirect vulnerability. Imagine a URL that looks like this shown on screen. Seems harmless, right? But this simple parameter allowed attackers to make legitimate institutional websites redirect visitors anywhere they wanted. The genius of this attack wasn't just in finding the vulnerability, it was in how they used it. We're talking about MIT, Columbia University, Universidad Central del Ecuador, and dozens of other major institutions. Each compromised site became a trusted stepping stone, leading unsuspecting users through a chain of legitimate-looking redirects before landing on malicious content. What made this attack particularly bad was its persistence. Unlike previous attacks that could be quickly blocked, these malicious redirects became embedded in search results. When you searched for legitimate academic content, these compromised links would appear right alongside genuine results, carrying the full authority of these prestigious institutions. But the attack didn't stop at universities. As the technique evolved, attackers began targeting government websites and corporate entities. This wasn't just about redirecting traffic. These attackers had effectively created a network of trusted domains that could be used to bypass virtually any security filter. After all, how do you block traffic coming from legitimate government and educational institutions? So yeah, do you see where I'm going with this? From educational domains, to dating platforms, to podcast networks, different threat actors discovered how to exploit us. Whether they were targeting education domains or podcast metadata, it was the recognition that you don't need to hack platforms when you can simply manipulate them. I've seen countless security measures fail, but this response, this was different. Let me take you inside the dating app Grindr's security operations. Alice Hunsberger, their Senior Director of Customer Experience, implemented what I consider a game changer, an AI system specifically designed to detect non-human behavior. Think about that for a second. Not just blocking specific actions, but actually learning what makes a human user different from an automated attack. While Grindr was fighting bots with AI, Firstory, a podcast distribution service, took a completely different approach. Their co-founder Stanley Yu implemented something deceptively simple yet effective: keyword scanning. They specifically targeted terms like EPUB and PDF in podcast titles and show notes. Why? Because these were the telltale signatures of spam content masquerading as legitimate podcasts. But perhaps the most clever defense came in the form of email pattern blocking. You see, attackers often use a predictable pattern. It's a generic text string, followed by some numbers. After all, it's what most people intuitively do when they make an email account. By identifying and blocking these patterns, platforms could stop many automated accounts before they even got started. Platforms began sharing information with services like Firstory, integrating directly with Spotify's API for rapid content removal. When one platform detected a threat, others could respond almost instantly. I've studied cyber defense for years, and I will say that this is an impressive response. It's not always we get something like this. Sometimes you've got to fight for your own safety and online security. The real question isn't whether these measures are perfect. They're not. The only real question is how hackers will adapt to bypass this layer of security. These attacks have been going on for a long time, you know. I'll try to cover some more details about the art of SEO poisoning and platform abuse in the future. Remember, SEO poisoning is about flooding legitimate platforms with content that looks real enough to rank in search results, then switching it out with something sinister once it gains visibility. Hopefully, the next time you click on a Spotify link or try to find an audiobook on Audible, you don't come across one of these. Or hopefully, the love of your life you find on a dating app doesn't want you to go to some sketchy website. But if you do find something, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you found. There's an uncomfortable truth we need to face, and that is that no platform you use on the internet that's open to all users can be completely immune from abuse. The very features that make these platforms useful, their openness, their accessibility, are the same features that make them a playground for hackers. That's the real challenge, so be careful out there. Hey there, Hacker Gallery here. Question for you. You do know that hospitals and doctors' offices all have something very important and personal to us, right? Yeah, our deepest, darkest secrets. Our physical and mental health information, potentially even photos of us to help them diagnose issues. Pretty important to keep this stuff private. When you get to the doctor and they write all sorts of notes about you, you'd trust that they would keep it safe? I mean, I hope so. Well, turns out that makes them prime targets for some seriously nasty cyber attacks. And, well, that really is the beginning of our story. I want to tell you about this group called BlackCat, or Alpha, if you're feeling fancy. These guys aren't your average hackers. Basically, they're like the Amazon of cybercrime, providing tools for other criminals to use. According to the FBI, these cats have hit at least 60 different places around the world. That's no small-time operation. Before I continue, yes, even hospitals and doctors. So picture this. It's November 2021, and cybersecurity experts start noticing something new on the scene. This ransomware called BlackCat pops up, and it's not like anything they've seen before. What makes BlackCat special is the tech they're using. They've built their ransomware using something called Rust. Now, Rust isn't your grandpa's programming language. It's new, it's fast, and it's a real pain for network defenders to detect. The FBI says it gives BlackCat better performance and lets them do more damage more quickly. Here's how it works. You've got the access brokers. These are the guys who find ways into networks and keep those backdoors open. Then there's the operators. They're the ones who actually make the ransomware tools. Finally, you've got the affiliates. These are the criminals who use those tools to do the dirty work of spreading through networks, stealing data, and launching the ransomware. Now, let's talk about how these attacks actually go down. It's like a high-tech heist movie. This is a high-level view of their operation. 1. Getting in. They start by either exploiting vulnerabilities in outdated software, like unpatched Exchange servers, or using stolen passwords to log in through things like Remote Desktop Protocol, RDP. 2. Looking around. Once they're in, they use normal Windows tools in not-so-normal ways.
They'll run commands to gather info about the network.
Find important computers and figure out who has admin access. 3. Spreading out. They use tools like RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, or PSXEC to move from one computer to another. It's like they're hopping from island to island in a digital archipelago. 4. Stealing passwords. This is where it gets really technical. They use methods like LSASS dumping, basically grabbing a copy of a part of Windows that handles passwords. They might also use a tool called Mimikatz, a tool that is commonly used by hackers and security professionals to extract sensitive information, such as passwords and credentials, from a system's memory. What makes BlackCat extra worrisome is that the FBI has identified at least 2 old heads in the hacking world that are helping spread the malware. Prolific collaborator, also known as Dev0237, is involved and is well known to the scene, due to his involvement in deploying many payloads over the years. Not only him, but Dev0504 also, a well-known Revel affiliate. Well, yeah, they have been deploying BlackCat too. In just 4 months, BlackCat compromised at least 60 victims. And they're not just locking up data, they're threatening to leak it and even launch attacks to knock websites offline. It's like a triple threat of digital extortion. BlackCat can hit Windows, Linux, and even VMware systems. This means they can potentially take down entire virtual infrastructures, not just individual computers. And get this, the ransomware can actually spread itself, in some cases, customized by the criminals to fit whatever network they're attacking. So now that you know exactly how this group operated, it's time to look into one of their most evil attacks. July 3rd, 2022. While most people are getting ready for Independence Day barbecues, the people at Medical Associates of the Lehigh Valley are about to have their world turned upside down. So there they are, probably expecting a quiet holiday weekend, when suddenly they got all their files and servers locked up. The moment these Medical Associates of Lehigh Valley figured out what was happening, they jumped into action. It's the same as when you realize there's a fire in your house. You don't sit around wondering how it started. You grab the extinguisher and call 911. They immediately started locking down their network to stop the attack from spreading further. They brought in the big guns, third-party forensic specialists. Their job? Figure out exactly what happened and how bad the damage was. Now let me tell you. The potential damage here was no joke. We're talking about sensitive patient information. Names, addresses, birth dates, social security numbers, driver's licenses. But it gets worse. This data also included people's medical diagnoses, treatment info, and even what medications they were on. In the wrong hands, this kind of information can be devastating since attackers can blackmail these people. They used tools to scan BlackCat's network, looking for any open doors or windows they could slip through. One of these tools is called MAP. It's like a sonar for computer networks, pinging every device to see what's out there. They also used some built-in Windows commands. There's this command called NetView that shows all the shared folders on a network. They used a script called adrecon.ps1, which can pull out all sorts of juicy information from an organization's Active Directory. In one fell swoop, these hackers managed to infiltrate the systems, potentially accessing a treasure trove of sensitive patient data. And this, my friends, was just the beginning. Fast forward to the next year. The previous attack had blown over by now. They put it behind them, but it's on February 6th, 2023, and the Lehigh Valley Health Network is about to get popped again. Picture this. It's a normal Monday morning at Lehigh Valley. Doctors are making their rounds, nurses are checking on patients, and the IT team is probably sipping their first coffee of the day. But then, boom! They spot something fishy in their network. Now, when I say unauthorized activity, I'm not talking about some intern downloading movies on the company Wi-Fi. We're talking serious, malicious stuff here. The kind of activity that makes IT professionals break out in a cold sweat. Here's where it gets interesting. The epicenter of this digital disaster, a small physician practice in Lackawanna County. It's like the hackers found the perfect entry point, a smaller office that might not have the same level of security as the main hospital. So what does Lehigh Valley do? They don't mess around. They immediately call in the big guns, cybersecurity experts. These are the digital detectives, the guys who can look at lines of code and tell you exactly how the bad guys got in and what they're up to. But here's the kicker. While Lehigh Valley is scrambling to respond, the hackers are already making themselves at home in the network. They're like digital squatters, and they're not planning on leaving anytime soon. First up in their bag of tricks, creating new user accounts. It's like they're making copies of the keys to your house. They can come and go as they please. And to the system, they look like they belong there. Next, they're installing remote access tools. Think of it like setting up a secret tunnel into the network. They can sit on a beach halfway around the world and still have full access to Lehigh Valley systems. But the real gut punch? The data exfiltration. They're not just looking around, they're taking stuff. Patient records, financial information, maybe even those sensitive medical images we talked about earlier. And they're using some pretty slick tools to do it. They've got file transfer tools with names like MegaSync and rClone. But here's the sneaky part. They rename these tools to look like normal computer processes. It's like hiding a tank by painting it to look like a family minivan. So there you have it. In just a matter of days, these hackers have gone from knocking on the door to practically owning the place. And Lehigh Valley, they're just starting to realize the scale of the problem they're facing. But trust me, this is just the beginning. The real fireworks are yet to come. This is where things get really intense. It's February 20th, 2023, and Lehigh Valley Health CEO is about to drop a bombshell on the public. On Monday morning, Lehigh Valley's president and CEO, Brian A. Nestor, steps up to the mic. He's got this look on his face like he's about to tell you your dog died. And then he drops it. Lehigh Valley has been hit by a cyber attack, but not just any cyber attack. We're talking about a ransomware gang called BlackCat, and these guys are no joke. Nestor says, as of today, the attack has not disrupted Lehigh Valley's operations. But you've got to wonder, is that really true, or is it just what they're telling the public to avoid panic? Nestor reveals that the attack targeted the network of one physician practice in Lackawanna County. It's like these hackers found the weakest link in the chain and went for it. Now, most companies in this situation might be tempted to just pay up and make the problem go away. But not Lehigh Valley. Nestor straight up says they're not paying the ransom. It's like watching someone tell a bully, "No, I won't give you my lunch money." Ballsy move. But is it the right one? So here's apparently what they did. These guys were out for blood. They used the tools we explained earlier to complete their attack. Remember that thing called SecSec? It's how they executed the malware across all the computer systems. They use it to spread their nasty code all over the network. The command they use looks something like this. To the average Joe, that might look like gibberish, but to a hacker, it's the key to the kingdom. But BlackCat doesn't stop there. They've got some tricks up their sleeve to make sure Lehigh Valley can't easily recover from this attack. They're deleting what are called shadow copies. These are like backup snapshots of your files that Windows keeps around. It's like burning the lifeboats on a sinking ship. And if that wasn't bad enough, they're also messing with something called the bootloader. This is the part of your computer that kicks in when you turn it on and tells it how to start up. By modifying this, BlackCat is making it even harder for Lehigh Valley to recover their systems. So there you have it. Lehigh Valley is in a real pickle. They've got a sophisticated hacker group breathing down their neck. They've gone public with the attack, and they're refusing to pay up. It's like watching a high-stakes poker game, and Lehigh Valley just went all in. The question is, do they have the cards to back it up? It's March 4th, 2023. The BlackCat gang, also known as Alpha, decides it's time to turn up the heat. These guys aren't messing around anymore. They go straight to their website and post a warning that's basically the cyber equivalent of holding a gun to Lehigh Valley's head. They're saying, pay up, or we're gonna start sharing those stolen images online. Now, you've got to understand, we're not just talking about some random selfies here. These are medical images, the kind of stuff you'd never want anyone to see. It's a punch to the gut for Lehigh Valley and their patients. But the medical company is not backing down. They're standing their ground like a boxer in the 12th round.
They flat out refuse to pay the ransom. It's a ballsy move. I'll give them that. So what do they do next? They go public.
They start informing their customers and staff about the breach. It's like they're trying to get ahead of the story, you know? But man, that's gotta be a tough conversation. Imagine having to tell people that their private medical info might be out there in the wild. Now, this is where it gets really crazy. The Alpha gang, they're not happy about being ignored. So on March 10th, just 6 days later, they decide to show Lehigh Valley that they stand 10 toes down. They dump 132 gigabytes of stolen data online. That's not just a leak. That's a flood. We're talking about the equivalent of tens of thousands of high-res photos or documents. But these hackers, they're playing a long game. They don't just dump all the data at once. No, they're threatening to release more every single week until they pay up. So there you have it. Lehigh Valley is caught between a rock and a hard place. They've got sensitive patient data leaking online, more threats coming in, and they're still refusing to pay up. It's like watching a high-stakes poker game. But the chips are people's private medical information. And the question on everyone's mind is, how much worse is this going to get? All right, this is where things get real. It's June 23rd, 2023, and Lehigh Valley Health Network is about to drop a bombshell that's going to make your head spin. Lehigh Valley sends out this cyber incident notification, right? It's like they're finally pulling back the curtain on this whole mess, and let me tell you, it's not pretty. They start laying out the extent of this breach, and it's like watching a car crash in slow motion. You know it's bad, but you can't look away. They're talking about all these different types of data that got swiped by these hackers. It's not just some random info. We're talking about the really personal stuff. First up, you've got your basic personal info. Names, addresses, phone numbers. That's bad enough, right? But then it gets worse. They're saying medical record numbers were taken. That's like your entire medical history just out there in the open. But wait, there's more. They're talking about treatment and diagnosis information. That includes something called CPT codes. Now, for those of you who don't know, CPT stands for Current Procedural Terminology. It's like a secret code doctors use to describe medical procedures. So if you had a weird rash or an embarrassing procedure, that info is now out there. And it doesn't stop there. Health insurance information was also part of the breach. That's the kind of stuff identity thieves dream about. Now, for some unlucky victims, it gets even worse. We're talking email addresses, banking information, social security numbers, and driver's license numbers. That's everything a bad guy needs to steal your identity and wreck your life. But here's the real kicker, and I almost can't believe I'm saying this. For a limited number of individuals. And to be fair, they're being real vague about how many that is. The hackers got their hands on clinical images. We're talking about photos taken during treatment. Use your imagination. This is the kind of stuff that keeps people up at night. So there you have it.
The company finally comes clean about the full extent of this breach.
We're talking about a massive violation of privacy on a scale that's hard to comprehend. It's like these hackers didn't just break into people's houses. They went through their medicine cabinets, read their diaries, and took pictures of their most private moments. This is the kind of thing that makes you wonder, is anything really safe anymore? And what's it going to take for healthcare organizations to start taking cybersecurity seriously? Because let me tell you, this is not the kind of wake-up call anyone wants to get. All right, we're in the aftermath now, and let me tell you, it's not pretty. We're talking about real people, real lives turned upside down by this cyber attack. Let's break it down. It's March 6th, 2023. Some poor woman gets a call from the hospital's VP of Compliance. Now, imagine getting that call. Your heart's probably racing, right? And then, boom, they drop the bomb. Your naked pictures are online for the world to see. But here's where it gets really messed up. The VP, this person who's supposed to be helping you through this nightmare, actually chuckles. Can you believe that? Like this is some kind of joke. And then they offer 2 years of credit monitoring, as if that's going to fix the fact that your most private moments are now public. The emotional toll of something like this? It's off the charts. We're talking about a complete violation of privacy. This isn't just about identity theft or financial loss. This is deeply personal, deeply traumatic stuff. Now, fast forward to September 12th, 2024. Lehigh Valley Health Network is writing a big fat check for $65 million. That's right, $65 million for a class action lawsuit settlement. All because they couldn't keep their patients' data safe. We're talking about 135,000 people affected by this breach. Patients, employees, you name it. The lawyers are calling this the biggest settlement of its kind, dollar for dollar, in any healthcare data breach case. Over 600 people had their nude medical photos posted online. Can you imagine that? You go to the hospital, you're at your most vulnerable, and next thing you know, those images are out there for anyone to see. The settlement is dishing out anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 to the victims.
And if your nude pics ended up on the dark web,
You're getting the max payout. In fact, 80% of the settlement, that's $52 million, is going to those victims. Now, don't get me wrong, money helps, but it doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't take those images off the internet. It doesn't undo the trauma. So, where do we go from here? Well, there's a final approval hearing scheduled for November 15th, 2024. But that's just paperwork at this point. The real question is, how do we stop this from happening again? How do we make sure hospitals and healthcare providers are taking cybersecurity seriously? Because let's face it, this isn't just about money or data. This is about people's lives, their dignity, their privacy. This whole mess is a wake-up call. In today's digital world, cybersecurity isn't just some tech thing. It's about protecting real people from real harm. And if healthcare providers don't step up their game, we're going to see more stories like this. And trust me, nobody wants that. Well, maybe some of you do.